Afternoon. Welcome to the July 17th, 2023 meeting of the Design Review Committee. DRC is a subcommittee of historic zoning. The meeting is informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or COA for projects within the city's historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice, but the DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, which is the Historic Zoning Commission. There are 12 items on the afternoon's agenda. When the item is called, please introduce yourself and generally describe your item in about 3 to 5 minutes. All right, we're ready for the first item, which is consideration of an addition at 1303 Adams Street. Joey, okay.
Hello again, y'all.
And once again, please introduce yourself.
David Swift, owner. Thank you. David Swift, owner 1303 Adams Street. Good to see y'all again tonight. We are here with some new information and also a revision for our plans here at the house. Wanted to run down with you one big kind of piece of oversight on our part from the past presentations, as well as there was a design, maybe a request for an additional design as well. So we have that here tonight too. But first, we kind of from last time, we were proposing a 69% historic footprint increase. Obviously realized that was a big chunk, big number. However, we did our math wrong. If you look at the piece that's up on the screen right now, there's the historic addition piece. It's front left of the house, very bottom left. Yeah, that little room right there. We had not included that in our ratio numbers prior, and that is a historic piece of the historic footprint. So obviously adding that square footage in brings the attempted square footage down from 69% to 60%. So that's obviously 50% of that. That's a pretty big chunk. That's just an oversight on our numbers. We were going back to kind of try to get another game plan for our third round here, and notice that. So obviously, kind of maybe in consideration with sort of what we presented before, with the lot percentage being at 10%. With the proposed addition as it sits, with either one of these proposed additions ideas that we have tonight, both of those will sit at the lot percentage of 10%. I believe the 35% is the guideline on that piece. So we're under that by 2/3. You can kind of see the lot here as it shows a little bit of a bigger lot here for downtown Franklin. Relatively speaking. So anyways, we do have, we kind of wanted to say like, hey, on our original idea, obviously our hope is like, oh, with new eyes that, hey, those are two very different percentages, obviously. And so wanted to hope that maybe that would appeal to you all. And then also we brought another design as well, which would be like an option too. I think the footprint is similar. We're just trying to figure out a way to, if that changes anything for anyone, so it kind of maybe pushes a little bit of more square footage to the back right corner, as opposed to it all being on the left side right there. Both of those sit just at 60% increase over the historical footprint. But I think you guys are relatively familiar with what we got going on here. So I think that sort of summarizes the two major change pieces. But I think that's everything for me.
Okay, Joey, you.
Yes, thank you. And we were able to verify those numbers, that the correct historic footprint is around 2,300 square feet, not the 2,167 listed originally. And just reviewing the two options, we'll go back to the first option, which is what you previously saw last week, where everything is shifted more towards the left side of the home, as well as this kind of back addition as well. Whereas with the second option, you have a bit more space between the historic form of the home and the other addition is tucked more to the right side rather than having it all on the left. The biggest difference I noticed, at least from the street elevation, was you can see a little bit of that right addition kind of over top of that front gable. Otherwise, it's pretty well hidden behind the main form of the house. So again, it does, the additional square footage of the historic footprint does bring the overall footprint of the addition down to 60%, but the guidelines do recommend 50%. So it is still over the recommended footprint of by the guideline standards or recommendations. But again, this is a rather large lot for this area, and with the addition be around 10% lot coverage.
So is 20, what did we see last Monday, a week ago, as far as the historic footprint? I thought it was 2294.
It was, I can pull that up, but I believe it was 2167.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Who wants to start?
Can I just ask one? Joey, can I just ask one clarifying question on that?
Only
roof?
one.
The roof line behind the dormer, it looks where you said it could be seen a little bit. It's labeled existing roof. Is that the current height, or are they maintaining, or are they doing something
Zoom
different
in here.
there? It's kind of, you had to go all the way out.
So the gable portion and then the wing portion is existing. What's a little bit darker toned is the new dormer that's on the addition behind that gable.
Okay, I see.
I can scroll back up to the earlier page so you can see the difference. See, in this option 1 or option A, that
You don't
dormer
have
is
it at
not
all.
there.
I'm
Yeah.
with you. Okay, so that's what you were referencing, not the roof line behind the. Okay, that's all. That was my question. Thanks.
Well, I can start. So option 1, I think is fine. I mean, I don't think that was so much the issue where the additions were located, so much that it was the 69%. And I noticed because there are 2 outbuildings on the property, one being a pool house and then the pool, and then another outbuilding. And so with all of that, it's 10% lot coverage or just the house?
That would be total according to the applicant.
And I remember we were discussing the new guidelines about the 50% and what we would do with that. And we did kind of leave that option, that if you had a very large lot, that you might could increase your square footage. But kind of in my thinking at that time was that if you had like a 1,500 square foot house on a very large lot, half of that's only 750 square feet. So that really doesn't give you a lot of an option. But currently we're talking about a much larger house than that. So what would be your total square footage as proposed with the new additions on this house?
It's actually, I think it's, I don't know it off the top of my head. I apologize, but I believe it's listed. Top, you can see this text top left there.
So the proposed footprint for option A is 1,395 square feet versus the 2,294 square feet of the historic footprint.
So you would just add those 2 numbers together.
Right at 3,700 square feet.
So it's 3,700.
And Mr. Laster, a part of our thought with this, just, I don't know if this helps to paint a picture a little bit, is there's just not we can always go up, right? I mean, it's a footprint question, not as much as a square footage question is my understanding. But there's just not really a lot of great space for that. It's really a 1-story house as it sits. There's no second story in it well, technically there was added a little bit of a loft area at one point, but it's a little bit of I don't know that it would pass codes, I'll put it that way. that was added a long time ago. And so it's really a one-story house. So, I mean, that's kind of a little bit of our ask here is like, hey, you know, we could probably figure out a way to stack it up there and, you know, put it somewhere else. But like for practicality, I think of kind of like what it is, it made sense to us that it would make more sense to do it this way. That's sort of our thought.
So option 2 with the dormer, is that what we're seeing on the side?
We're
shed-
trying
little
to
shed dormer, if you
we're
get
trying to
option
try to come up with another idea that maybe we can get some of that square footage and get a outdoor space, like a little bit of a covered patio there area and option 2. But that's the idea, I think, with the kind of the footprint increase.
Could you do that with option 1?
Well, I'm sorry, which part? Just
Just to give yourself more square footage using that shed dormer, but except on the back of the house rather than the side?
They do have a shed dormer. You can see it here. This is option 1.
that's over the garage there. So that would be really the only piece would be in the new piece. That would be the, hey, where can we get some square footage? The lot slopes down in the back. So that garage being at the very back is a low spot where we could get something up that would make sense to have some square footage there. But yeah, that piece is in the back there.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. Kathy, you got any comments?
Which option do you prefer?
Me or my wife?
Your wife.
That was well stated.
course.
I'm not just reviewing these plans with you all, I promise you. My wife, I believe, would prefer a version of option 2.
Okay.
And she's, this is a great opportunity. She just specifically asked me to ask this question. If we were if we were to do something along like a option 2 here, if we're shifting the footprint around a little bit, say we make the kitchen a little bit smaller, but the other addition piece a little bit larger, does that matter to you all at all? Meaning, like, I think maybe she would prefer it to be changed a little bit more than it is now, but nothing really changed, but the proportions changed, if that makes sense.
Well, that sort of
Am I
was where
speaking
I was
clearly?
going with this, is because both option 1 and 2 have the same 60%. So, from our guideline standpoint, you've given us 2 options that are just over 10% by the guidelines. But that's why I asked which one did you prefer. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me which one, but I mean, I'm looking at what kind of square footage coverages that you're dealing with. So the plan in option 1 didn't change, it was just a math error. And so then option 2 shows us how you would reconfigure it to still be at that 60%. Have you considered an option 3 to meet the 50%? I know your lot is large.
To speak just candidly with you all, the house is in rough shape. More rough shape than we thought it was. We knew that getting in, it was going to need a good bit, obviously. And we didn't fully maybe understand the full scope of what we're going to do here, right, initially. I don't want to sob story on you, but I'm from Franklin, right? I grew up hanging out behind downtown Franklin Starbucks every weekend. Cops roll around at 11 o'clock. Hey, everybody, it's time to go home. Sounds good. Thanks. Have a good one. Like, that was it, right? Our dreams of being downtown Franklin. When we drew up what we wanted, it was more than this. We got into this guidelines area, had to figure out, okay, hey, what makes sense? We can't just blow it out and double the square foot XYZ, right? But we are genuinely trying to give it a go here to be creative. We we understand we're trying to push a little bit on the square footage. But we are also trying to be creative at the same time, Miss Kathy, to answer your question. We were obviously delighted that we made a mathematical error because it didn't, because it didn't seem like we were trying to get, we were like, wow, we can't get what we need at a 69% increase here. So to answer your question, yes, but we do also, there are some things that like just us as a family have got to have, just to be completely honest with you. I know that doesn't probably matter to any, hey, we got the guidelines, we got to do what we got to do, the regulations, that type of thing. But this is kind of where we're at to try to say, hey, like we think this is probably close to where we can make it work for us.
Okay, who's next? Scott, you got any comments?
I have no comments this time.
Mary?
The big dormers on the very back, so you won't see it. So
Yes, ma'am.
isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am. In option 1, that is correct. Option 2, as Joey pointed out, I think you can see it from the front elevation, technically, on the right
And,
side.
You can see that from the front?
Yep.
In option 2,
So this
Probably on
this
option-
dorm
right here.
this is option
Right here.
2,
Right.
and the dormer that I'm circling right now on the screen is what you could see the side of from the street,
But not on option 1.
not on option 1.
So I was looking at option 1.
Yes.
So that particular feature would make me prefer option 1. And the other thing, and I would like to see the chimney get a little bit nearer at the top, because I think we have seen some of those we've approved, and I think they're going to end up looking like, hey, I was built around turn on my mic. I was built around the 2020. I think they're going to start dating houses, and I don't think they are classically proportioned with historic districts. So I think those would be my 2 comments. I have been agreeable on larger lots, that if you go over the square footage some and it's not impacting the visibility from the street, I think it's just a fortunate position to be in that the lot was bigger. So that doesn't concern me in this situation as much as those 2 details. Thank you.
can I ask you a clarifying question, Miss Mary? On the chimney here, does that, in your mind, does that look like after it maybe comes above the roof line, it gets narrower, goes up? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary hit on some of the comments that I kind of had. That particular mast in the back on option 2 that is, a patio on option 1 and is covered and has space above it. I think the massing is a little big. We can even see it in the side elevation from the other side. It's a tall thing. It's got higher bearing points, all that, and then it's kind of exacerbated by the fact that there's this kind of peeled up shed dormer on the side. And I was looking to see how far back it is, and I'm not sure it's far enough back that it kind of relieves itself from the front elevation as well as we would maybe hope. And the Department of Interior standards speak to kind of protecting corners and things too, and that wrapping the whole back is usually frowned on because you kind of from the back and even neighbors lose all of what was kind of the historic form of the house, and that's what the guidelines are intended to protect. So I tend to like option 1 better for those reasons. Maybe there's an in-between of sorts. I don't know. I'd have to talk with your architect about that, but I do prefer option 1 for those reasons.
I would concur with the comments on that Mary and Tyler made on the dormer, on that new dormer. And for that reason, I would prefer option 1. I am forgiving going to the 60%. You've reduced it, from 69 to 60. So I'm forgiving on that because I know the lot, and it's plenty big, and plus the fact this is, for the most part, this is hidden from the front view, all of this addition. So I think we have to, I would consider that strongly. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents. Anybody else got anything?
Am I able to ask questions?
Sure. This is a give and take right now.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking here. Mr. Lasher, can I ask you a question? Sure. So last time, the footprint was an issue for you. Does it, from changing to 69 to 60%, does that weigh on you at all, in any way, either direction?
It does not. I would like to see it closer to the 50%. I think we've shown a precedent in the past to vary a little bit off that 50. But the closer we get to 60 and then above that, I think it sets a bad precedent, for other applications that come before us.
Okay. So maybe a drop in that might help you.
I would like to see a little drop in that 60%.
Okay. Thank you.
I would concur with that, only because option 1 as you presented it today is the same option 1 as
Right.
you originally presented it.
Yeah.
It didn't change. You just found the math error to your
Yeah.
favor. So
I realize, yeah.
Okay, anything else? We need to move on otherwise. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Great, thanks, y'all.
All right, the second one that was printed on the agenda has been withdrawn for signage at 99 East Main Street. So we're going to move to the next one, which is consideration of alterations, canopy and fence barrier at 230 Franklin Road, Building 3. Scott, you brought the whole team today.
I did.
Oh, no, I'm fine. We'll share. We'll share. No problem.
Was that just before we pass these out?
Yeah. Here, I'll handle the staff.
Okay, who's going to
These
start?
are half of the canopy proposed locations of the factory.
So my name is Scott Wins with Anecdote.
Is that mic on?
Yes.
Green button.
Greg Gamble and then Benton representing Holiday. Trying to address some of the concerns here of the extent of what the development would include as far as submissions on canopies, where those patios are located, and trying to give a better understanding of the intentionality based on our suggested improvements to the Building 3C. And so what we've done here is hopefully between the three of us, we can talk through what considerations or modifications we can make to put our best foot forward with being complementary to the building, but also getting a canopy added for our tenant for Edley's Barbecue.
Hi, I'm Greg Gamble. At the Historic Zoning Commission meeting, there were some questions about where the factory may have considerations for canopies in the future. This map that you're looking at here shows outdoor dining areas A through J as submitted with the development plan. So this is with the PUD development plan that was approved by the board, mayor, and alderman. These locations are where we intend to have outdoor dining. I've asked Benton Smothers with Holiday to join us this evening to talk a little bit about what they've heard from tenants, what the expectations that some of the tenants have, and where we might have requests for canopies. And so Benton's here to talk with you about those tonight. Not every one of these will have canopies. I want to be clear about that. This is the outdoor dining location in the development plan.
Yeah, sure. Just a reminder to the commission that anything you guys see when it gets to you, it's gone through our review process. So historic zoning staff and planning staff, they receive an affidavit that's signed by us before the tenant can submit plans. So before we release that, we've gone through a design review process with them. So it has been vetted. That's signage, that's any exterior improvements. And they're bound to do this via our lease. So they cannot go and get something permitted or build something without our consent. So as far as this goes, this is the plan. This was submitted with our development plan revision 2, so our PUD. that went through the BOMA process. This was a conceptual layout, understanding that there could be some modifications to this as we go through it, but the idea was that we were setting outdoor dining square footage, and it followed along with the entitlements, and which really came down to parking as well as just total square foot. So the highlighted areas there on your screen are square footages that we thought were likely to be outdoor dining areas, and we figured that into our parking calcs, and that went into the BOMA, in the PUD square footage. So as far as that, I think really the question you all had was, well, if we start to approve some, is that going to really open up the floodgates? And I think that I could go through and kind of speculate on some of these locations. I can tell you that I can't imagine more than half having a tenant that would want a patio canopy. Or that we would want to allow. There's some conditions that are just, they don't lend themselves to it. And I think every one of these spaces, these locations has enough nuance that it's not, you're not setting a precedent, so to speak, if you just allow one. But I could see a few that could easily have a patio canopy. C is the location we're talking about right now. D is the Water Tower restaurant. So we have leased that space. It has not been made public yet, but it'll be a pretty exciting announcement. But I know that they're going to want something there, right?
This is an area that's tucked in between the building wall, the factory, and a 6-foot retaining wall on the side of the water.
Right,
tower.
and I'd
Kind of a little
right. Right, and it's a little bit of a kind of side tucked in elevation, and I think that it lends itself to that, to allow for this too. It's something that I'd spoken with Amanda Rose some time ago about the idea and kind of getting her general feedback, and I think that she kind of understood that there was that location was, an easy, potentially an easier ask for you all. So it was something that we felt good enough about kind of, thinking about. Obviously C and B, B is the back of Mafioso's. I think at some point that, that's obviously a back elevation, so that should be more palatable. C is kind of also tucked into that same area. I know it's close to the entry, but we felt it was off the entry enough, and in that courtyard that we felt okay with allowing it, and also understanding Edley's need for covered seating too as part of their business plan. The other locations that, I'm kind of speculating, but G is another area that I thought that could lend itself. Now that's Etch's patio, and they have not indicated that they're looking to do anything. So I don't see anything in the short term. F, H, and I think are unlikely. E potentially, and then J. J's kind of a longer term thing, but I guess I'm just kind of speculating a little bit here just to give you a little bit of color, but I can't think of more than just a few canopies. And the other thought that we were kind of ideating on is as we were working with Scott and his team on the design, we really liked that they were going in the route that made this work a little bit better off the existing roof. And it seemed to kind of flow a little bit better. So it kind of lent itself to the idea of maybe creating some kind of general design standard for these. But I think that's really looking for feedback from you all on that too.
Okay, staff?
So as you all saw last Monday, I'll pull up the photo of the proposed canopy. The guidelines recommend, do not place, canopies where they did not exist historically and where they could be seen from street view. And so it could potentially be seen from Franklin Road. And so the materials are appropriate within the design guidelines and the zoning ordinance. The proposed they're proposing to use reclaimed brick and metal and roofing material that was approved previously at other locations on the factory. Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to start? Kathy.
I'm on the end. Emily, you mentioned reclaimed brick. Where's the reclaimed brick on the canopy? Posts?
So from previous conversations with the applicant, I believe it's going to be down here at the bottom of the columns.
Okay.
So per the zoning regulations, we're required to have brick bases on the columns. Is not we'd prefer not to have them. We feel like it is more subtle without the brick bases, but the reasoning behind that is that they're required per the zoning requirements. And that brick will be coming from Holiday as what's reclaimed from the actual factory itself. If we have to put the brick bases on there, it would match the existing building.
Okay. Thank you.
That's from stock that we have on site from
Okay.
other areas at the factory, so.
Thank you. Okay. My other general vision and feeling how y'all approached this reformation of the building, when we discussed windows and other architectural features, we wanted to continue with this unified approach to it all. So I really liked hearing that, Scott, you would be working on like some sort of a general design standard, and I think that's a good direction to continue with, depending on how many canopies. To me, they're a little bit more than a canopy, because I thought about that since our last meeting. It's more like porch covers. Some of these are pretty extensive. So I think it's really important that no matter how many end up doing it, that there is some sort of a standard that they all follow through. And has it ever occurred like no canopies? I understand companies have business concepts that they want to follow with having covered seating, but could the factory be a place where there are no covered canopies, so it doesn't interfere with another plane that interrupts, the facade, and these canopies are on the front, one of the front facades?
Well, this is something that we've talked at length with the client. During COVID, this was their lifeline of being able to stay open and have a covering for weathers. So this is a top priority for our client, and it'd be fantastic if we can find a way to mold that together. But that is a big design element in all of their locations, but it also helped keep them open while everything was shut down.
Yeah, I think that there are different cases, right? I think I'm also thinking about the Water Tower Restaurant, that the way that their space lays out and the size of their patio, the patio is going to be pretty important to them. I think that at some point you will see what they propose, but there are different nuances for their space too, where any canopy, they would not have the same canopy. I don't think. I think it would. Now the design standards, maybe we keep to some different standards, but the size, the shape, height. I think that there's some nuances there too. So you're seeing something new with each one, but I know that as far as this, to Scott's point, that from a business perspective, it's pretty significant for some of these restaurants.
I remember some of the perspectives and then the walkthrough visual that we did with the little hit it on the app on your website, which was really effective to see what was going to happen there. Canopies weren't in any of that. So it wasn't like an original vision for the space, and that's just kind of how I'm keeping the whole, what was the whole design intent of this? And when I look at that, that's a great perspective up on the screen, but it is another competing building element with the factory, so, for what it's worth.
All right, Scott?
I spoke at the last meeting about this and was in favor of this canopy, and I think I still like the idea of the canopy. I'm trying to get the dimensions on them. I can't quite find them on here, actually how large it is.
It is 16 feet or 17 feet by 40.
70 by 40, so that's a good size canopy. But I think if you incorporate the garden landscaping revision that y'all proposed the last time, I think it's far enough personally away from the front door that it would work for me.
Mary?
I'm trying to look at the whole project, and I do think this design is quiet. I hope you wouldn't have to do the brick piers. I'm not a fan. I wish that you could go to that trouble to see if it could just come straight down. The other day, we were presented with a cattywampus neon sign. I'm not going to be for that. If you look at the whole factory, we want to keep that industrial vibe. It's lots of different things. And so, in my mind, if you do, I hope not this many canopies, but if you do a very quiet canopy here and there, then the trade-off to me is going to be that the signage can't get out of scale, because at some point there's just too much. So that would be my feedback.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't particularly have a problem with the design of the canopy. It's just, like you said, the nuance of this specific location really does kind of break the plane of what everybody considers the front of the factory. And there's a lot of the factory in terms of what touches the parking lots. And that is the most predominant spot. And so it's not a deal breaker for me. I do think it's off to the side, but I want to be careful about it. The one where the Water Tower restaurant is, we'll get into talking about that, but I feel like it can be set back a few feet to the first column bay or something, and then you're not breaking the front of that plane. I feel differently about that. Whereas this one is appended to the front. Now, I haven't forgotten what came off the front of this building too. So, in some regards, I give you credit for that, because I'm like, well, we got to give a little. You guys took something that was not historic off of the front, and it was a big appendage. So I'm a little indifferent to it. You were talking about the other locations, and I'm thinking, I can see one there. That's not the very front. This one is one of the only ones at this time that's really contentious to me because of where it's placed. I think scale-wise, it's okay. It's just that placement piece is hard for me to kind of accept. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Brian?
and I appreciate Kathy beginning this conversation, and thank you for coming to us with more information. So when I look at the new landscape, Joey, could you scroll back, or Emily, to that landscape? So that was one of my, so first, let's go back to your, and you can leave it there, but your map that shows the entire site. Like, as Tyler was saying, like J. You could see J probably naturally having something in that location. Mafioso's probably already has a covering.
They have it screened in upstairs,
Upstairs.
second floor.
Right.
Everything that's on the ground plane behind is not. It's umbrellas. And the only problem with umbrellas is it's great for creating shade when you're sitting and enjoying outdoor dining. But you can imagine this summer how often those umbrellas would have to go up and down during the constant rolling storms that we've had all summer long. It's just nice to have something a little bit more permanent so that you have covering for rain and or sun as well, both.
So going back to this landscape, so this is how it's going to be.
Correct.
Because when I look at like C, we're C, and I see what's red and what's marked, what's actually surrounded in red. When I first saw the architectural rendering of what the cover would look like, I thought, well, there's another natural space on the other side for it.
Right.
I mean, if you were to put it there, someone else would come and ask for that one. But it looks like you've now filled all that in with landscape.
It's going to be
Right.
landscape.
Right. Yeah, we pivoted a little bit with the tenancy. So, and that's and the reason why we were able to, again, we worked with Edley's team on getting that canopy really simplified. Where we started, it was a little bit bulkier and bigger, and that was not going to work. This is simplified that so the sight lines are much better, so it doesn't take away from the facade as much. It doesn't take away from any visibility with the adjacent tenant. But the adjacent tenant went office, which was a little bit of a pivot. And we were thinking at one point it would be restaurant. We were really having trouble leasing it as restaurant. And so that made this a little bit more palatable.
So for the
Historically,
boards,
there really haven't been any outdoor gardens associated with the factory. There haven't been any outdoor spaces where people can go and sit and appreciate. This is one where you've got 2 restaurant anchors and an office where you can really start to get some activity outside, which is what we're excited about.
so do you expect ever to come before the board and ask for an awning in that location for a restaurant spot?
No time,
Where?
never.
So
Next,
that option will remain open at some point.
It is shown in the development plan that entire area could be outdoor dining. It's not what's being proposed now or today.
Right.
Ever,
Yeah.
never. I don't know.
right. This was a conceptual plan too. I think that I don't remember the genesis of this plan. I think it was to get to a square footage for the PUD, right? And so there was and so planning staff wanted to get some kind of idea of where this could all be and the quantity, and obviously that all played into parking counts because the patios. Well, I think Kelly can probably answer this, but I don't think that we needed the entitlement for the patio, but we needed to account for it in parking.
For outdoor,
right? For outdoor
probably
dining.
outdoor dining.
Right. So I think it was understood that this would there wasn't necessarily an entitlement to the locations, but this was giving some general feedback on where we thought that they could go. But to
Acceptable.
the idea of saying that nothing will change, it's kind of hard to, but I know that we've signed long-term leases with both of these spaces, so for the specific uses that I just mentioned. So
Okay, I was curious, thank you.
Okay, I'll be quick. I echo Mary's comments I think that this is very quiet. I don't like the brick piers. I understand that's a codes thing, but I think anything we can do to diminish that. And then here's my advice for what to bring to the meeting. I don't think you all are giving yourselves enough credit on the photos, because what I have to keep reminding myself is this is really tucked back in there. And if we're looking from the road, I mean, like, for example, the picture looking from, that's taken at basically the end of the steps at Mafioso's. I go all the way up the road because I think that it's good. We need to see what it looks like close up, but I think that on site, it's even farther away. That's my take.
If you go to the last 2 slides, you're right, and then what I don't want to pitch is smoke and mirrors, so we
I
took
get
it
it,
as close
and I
as we
think,
could here.
yeah,
But
I don't think
right,
you're doing that because you're showing us all the detail up front. We're obviously crawling all through it, but I do think we have to remind ourselves, where is the front? It's really at the road, and you're looking in even closer. So I just think it'd be a helpful vantage for everybody to see.
Those comments are spot on to what I was going to say, because I don't think you've done yourself justice, because that was our big, you're looking at, what was it, 16 by 40 foot canopy, and that's big when you look at it, when you drill down and look at it on these drawings, but looking at it from Franklin Road, the perspective back through Mafioso's, you can kind of get that with this idea in your head anyway. But to see that from the road and some idea of what that thing's going to look like, if that can be presented when you come to us for a vote, again, I think that's going to be very helpful. I think you have quieted it down. I do like the comments Mary and Josh made about the brick piers, if you don't have to do that. And I don't think you want to do that.
No.
And so, and that's a big space. And as Mary touched on, you're going to want to come back to us on signs. I don't know what the thought is on that, but that's something else.
Yeah, right now, our focus has been trying to get everything done. We do have the signage package from Benton. We understand where our limitations are there. There is one, the blade sign is where we're pitching the canopy to be. We understand that. We know that that's there. But right now, it's not a challenge for us.
Okay, but just to point that out. But I do think the good perspective from Franklin Road of that canopy would be very helpful to us.
Okay, absolutely.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think that this building the canopy is going to make it less distracting than if I pulled up and saw a sea of red umbrellas sticking up on a patio somewhere.
I think that's true. I hadn't thought
That
about
would,
it.
that'll
You're
that'll
right.
distract a lot more from the building than just having a subtle canopy.
Right.
Future canopies are going to have to stand on their own anyway, because, and Benton's exactly right. What's around the water tower is completely different environment than, in that space between the building and the water tower, completely different than what this is, from a lot of angles. So it's, and, you know, the rest of it will just have to stand on their own when they come before us, but if they do want something.
Jen, in this picture, the red dots look like canopies invading the front of the factory. And then when you look at the drawing,
That's
it's
not
not.
the case, right? I agree. I
So
focused
you
on that
may
too.
want to work on that.
Because ironically, there is a canopy next to what they're proposing already.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously much smaller, but
Thank you.
We're getting there. Anything else?
I think one of the things, if you go to the elevation, the flat elevation, when designing the canopy and its width and its length, what we wanted to stress there is what we didn't want to do is put a column in front of one of the historic windows.
Right.
And so what really set that width was
Is
based
that,
on trying to
okay.
center them within the brick piers to let the windows breathe all the way through. And so that, you know, when we talk about that, I think
Right.
we can talk about that next time as well. But we
Yeah.
were trying to be very intentional on where those placements are.
Well, you got a big space. I looked at it from the inside, so it's,
Yes.
that's a lot of footsies inside there, which is great, so, all
I
right.
went there this
Thank you
weekend,
so much.
and the front doors are stunning.
Yeah,
They work
they
so
are. I mean, it's just,
beautifully.
it is really
very
exciting
nice,
to walk
very
through that
nice.
They're
place.
accessible. They
yeah.
don't whack you in the back.
Right.
They're wonderful.
They're expensive, I can tell you. But they're it's a Middle Tennessee fabricator too, so
That's great.
It's nice. Well, they look great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Thank you, guys. Let's move on. Consideration of alterations, canopy and signage at 230 Franklin Road, Building 14.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is James Carroll. I'm with Powell Nashville, the architect for Hattie B's at Building 14 at the factory. I'm joined by Nick Bishop from Hattie B's, as well as Ben Smothers from Holiday. So we are here to look at signage in a canopy for our space. This is the signage plan approved, the holiday signage plan previously approved by Historic, calling for a blade sign at the end of our building and a canopy sign at the front entrance of the building. And just to refresh, there was an old canopy above the door that was non-historic that was approved to be demolished. Sorry. There's a photo of the existing canopy on the left that was demolished. And per the signage plan, to have a canopy sign in that location, we have proposed a new canopy to host that sign. And then the image on the right is the side of the building where we are proposing a blade sign. And the blade sign is part of the signage plan, but what we had presented last week was a slightly upsized sign at 6.5 square feet rather than 4.5 square feet. And the sign is red background with white text. And then the canopy is a black metal canopy above the door that ties back into the building with a red illuminated sign attached to the front of that. We do have, there's a image that's the same view as this one, but with the brick color shown. If you don't mind bringing that one up. We believe the color of the existing building helps provide some important context when it comes to the signage proposals.
And just a little bit of feedback from an owner perspective. This did go through our review process, per the typical design process, and we like it. I think first, if you break apart, there's the canopy, and then there's the signage. So the canopy is, I think, pretty straightforward, and it really harkens off of the canopy that we had previously approved with you all. That was, it's at Building 13. It's a Liberty Pike elevation. So there's an existing canopy that comes out towards the parking lot, and it had the gabled roof and the heavy timber columns. It's still there, but the plan that was a contemporary addition that we've got approval to demolish and then put back something simpler and more metal and flat. And so the idea is that this kind of plays off of that. It's very discreet, and also plays off of the windows a little bit. It's just simpler. So that's why we like that. And then it allows for the transom windows above, which is a nice element. And obviously you can just see the elevation better than the canopy that was there before. And not to mention better daylighting for the restaurant space. The signage, I know Mrs. Pierce has her opinion on this, so, but I hear you. It's reflective of their brand. And that's really what it gets down to signage. We like the distinction, because we want every brand to speak for itself. And Hattie B's has a very particular brand. Their colors, their fonts are proprietary, and they're distinctive. And if you just had the, in a worst case scenario for us, it's kind of like a communist Soviet Union scenario where every name is the same, and and the colors are just vanilla, and it's extremely boring, but this, and I get that there's some differences between a lower broad sign and a factory sign. I get that, so that's worth discussing. But whether you were to allow neon or some other variation, or that's what they're here to discuss with you all. But I know that the colors and the font and that type of thing are important for them, and they're important for us too. So.
Okay, anything else from y'all? Staff?
So just to sum up for the guidelines, so with the guidelines, let's see, we'll start with this sign. Because of the approved plans, the sign cannot be any bigger than 4.5 square feet. So in order to get a 6.5 square feet, they would have to go back to and get a modification of standards, go back to the development plan. And so that is the first thing.
Emily, do you mind if I just sorry, I meant to touch on that. Do you mind if we did get a modification of standards to allow for 6.5 square feet for blade signs when we came through BOMA. When we came through Historic Zoning Commission for the recommendation prior to that, we did discuss the reason that you guys were agreeable to that was that we were mainly focused on the pedestrian alley, and those signs needed to be the blade signs were more primary for those tenants because it was on a tight alley. So just recall that conversation. BOMA did allow for the modifications of standards across the board for 6.5 square feet. So now that was something that I discussed with the Hattie B's team too, so they're aware of your stance. They did want to talk about it because I think that I think it's worth. James will have some exhibits to show you the differences between 4.5 and 6.5. It seems so subtle that I figured it was worth them having a conversation with you all about it. But
Okay, so back to you. Wait a minute. I don't recall that change from 4.5 to 6.5 anywhere. Am I missing something?
We can go back and look at the approved conditions of approval and the modifications of standards again to verify what the maximum size could be. There were a couple things with the size of the projecting arm signs and the size of the canopy sign as well exceeded what was in the zoning ordinance. And then the type of illumination is also limited to external illumination. It doesn't allow for internal illumination for these particular sign types.
But the blade signs specifically, I didn't recall any change to 6.5 square feet. I mean, that's.
We can go back and look at the modifications of standards.
I think that's got bigger implications than Hattie B's.
yeah,
I don't
this
recall
was-
that at Planning Commission, but that BOMA could have changed that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we'll have to. I was reviewing it last week ahead of this, but it was there were different signs. There's this what I call the blade sign, and then there's also the vertical blade, and that size that was another topic.
I'm referring to what we're talking about here on this one.
Well, in this particular case, and you can see the inset there, the Building 14 South elevation, and that blue sign. That in that table, it's hard to see, but I bet it says 4.5 square feet.
It does.
Yeah.
No, that does.
Right. And so if you were to go on the other elevations on the pedestrian alley, all of those blade signs are 6.5 square feet. And we talked about the differences on the alley, the visibility of a primary sign was limited because of the width of the alley. And so really the blade sign became more of a primary for those tenants. And so that was why we asked for a larger sign. That was the discussion that we had with you all about the blade sign. Now, we didn't talk about it in this case.
Okay.
So this is an exception, but we did get the approval, the modification of standards from BOMA for the 6.5, which
Okay.
should have been covered on the whole site. Now, understanding that you go through your process and you may not approve locations,
Okay.
but
All
we
right.
did get the entitlements.
Okay,
for it.
all right. Well, they can double check that for us. All right. Did you have anything else?
It was just kind of the same for both of these signs, the size, the lighting, the colors, and that just kind of sums
Okay.
it up.
All right. Who wants to start it?
Oh,
Go. You're ready.
since I'm the one that said something, I look on my phone the whole time we're meeting, and I did the other day when you came to historic zoning with this sign, and you actually do have different interpretations of your Hattie B signs at different locations, at least on the internet, like the one on the side, the arm sign hanging out, is to me still your brand, but it's much different than the other one. And I guess when I saw the Hattie B sign that was downtown Nashville. I think the last thing we want is for this to feel like, oh, Franklin managed to pull off a little lower broad look here in Franklin. I think we want to be what we are at the factory. And so it is near housing. It's, it's going to be near more housing. It's part of the factory fabric. So I am not going to be for something this loud at that one place. And I do see different interpretations of it, and I do appreciate the brand. I mean, I get that.
Sorry, there's no chair for me up here. I'm Kelly. I was here the last few meetings. Is it on?
Yeah.
If you
No, it's
introduce
fine.
yourself. If
I'm
you'll
fine.
introduce
I'm
yourself.
tall enough. Thank you. So just, and I'll let Nick Jr.
And I'm sorry,
speak.
would you introduce yourself again?
I'm
please?
Kelly Williams with Hattie B's, construction manager. So I get what you're saying about Lower Broad for sure, but, and we have had some other iterations of signage when we first started, but it really has progressed to the red and the neon. And if you look in all our locations now, Lower Broad or Birmingham, we're using that red and those lights. So it really is it's our brand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Nick Bishop. I'm one of the co-founders. And thanks for letting us have this time. That neon script is in every one of our buildings. Now that blade sign is also, but that neon script is kind of our brand. It's our, and we totally agree. We don't want to lower Broad in Franklin. That's not our effort at all. But we have lots of, this is our second restaurant in Franklin. We've got Bishop's Meat and Three. We've been out here for a really long time. So we're excited about this project, and we just want to be able to do the best version of, what we do the best there, and to see life and activity and to the point about the canopies and the, umbrellas, just seeing people there is what's going to really revive that whole project. And so Ben's done a great job of getting a lot of incredible restaurants and other brands that are very Nashville to come out and be a part of it. And so certainly with respect to the neighborhood and with Franklin, this is just who we are. And so hoping that we can find some common ground on it.
And I do think going back to the blade sign, we're not opposed to going back to the 4.5 square feet if there was some little give and take for this situation. Benton said there was some approval on that larger size, so we proposed it as a variance. But that's not really the sticking point for us, I think.
Okay. Mary's made some comments. Who's next? Josh, Brian?
I guess I'll say if you got that 6.5 approved, make it really easy for staff and just pull it out and show them exactly where you got that modification to standard. And then what I'm hearing from staff is neon is a no-go from the guideline standpoint. So I respect the brand, and I've had to be in shoes similar to your all's on trade dress and signage, but the guidelines are here for a reason. So I think we just have to weigh all that very carefully.
Brian?
And I think we all understand brands. And, I think part of what the board does is, rather than trying to squelch creativity, is to think about our brand, the brand that's at the factory, and all that's supported by guidelines. And I think that's one of the reasons we have these conversations. And I would say that as a member of the board, looking at the guidelines, I couldn't support the neon because that's totally outside of what anyone else is really able to do in Franklin. And the increase in square footage, I'd like to see it as per the guidelines. I would say that your canopy, what I'm seeing on your canopy at least, I think the canopy looks great on the front of the building. And where the skewed sign's concerned, I mean, I'm still really grappling with that. We did see some renderings where a sign would maybe sit on top of a canopy, and I think our board was pretty amiable to that, and that's something different than we've seen before. But this is actually on the skew, and I think it's just going to take more thought about that. Or if you could think of another way you could do this, or some more renderings, or another idea to bring before the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler?
I think I'm struggling with everything that everybody's already mentioned. The blade sign, I don't have a problem with this 6.5 square feet, except that it's against the written rules, and our job is to consider any hardship. And I'm like, well, because you want it isn't a hardship necessarily. Even the colors for me, I understand that colors are a branding thing. It's important, and so I could be flexible on that, and I think I always have been flexible on the color thing, because specifically signs like that are something that come off and on of buildings all the time. It's not a permanent fixture forever, but so I can be flexible on that, and it doesn't look too big to me necessarily when you see it in this rendering. The neon sign is just, just got too many things against the guidelines. I don't know how to tell you to do it, and I wouldn't presume to do so. But I think when we thought it was a canopy sign, it was something sitting on a canopy or like on the canvas like you'd see downtown, is kind of what we had imagined in that area. So I think that one's a little further off for me. Yeah.
Kathy?
Emily, can you pull up the elevation where it shows it's kind of been colored? The brick is colored. It's one of their renderings. My question is,
It's page 2.
thank you. Are there any other tenants on that elevation, or is it just Hattie B's?
In that building will probably only have 2 tenants.
Will they have exterior signage in the other window? Will anything else other than Hattie B's be on that elevation? Signage.
Could be. There are not on this particular elevation shown in that screen. There are, this is not exactly a square building or rectangular. There are different elevations. So there is, there's a distance that moves, where you have a west-facing elevation and then, a new south elevation that's outside of the line of this. If you know what I'm talking about. So Dark Horse Institute is
14, but
there. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, building 14.
But the west elevation entrance, that would be somebody else.
Yeah,
Just down here.
That south elevation is another tenant. Right now,
Okay,
Dark
right here.
Horse Institute is leasing that to trade school. I think that, and that they'll be there for a little while. So there's no imminent change to their signage or their business that I'm aware of. Long term, there could be another restaurant in that building. That's what I see coming at some point down the road. And they would have signage.
They would have
too.
signage
Yeah,
on there.
there would be multiple tenants and multiple signs on this building, but probably no more than 2, and certainly no more than 3.
So the proposed neon Hattie's B portion, is that the appropriate size, or is that larger than our guidelines?
I would like to actually ask for a clarification there, because this signage guideline package here calls for 14.5 square feet, and we are within that number. But the staff recommendation talks about the 90% of the canopy face. which is that is saying that we are over the approved size. So I would just like a little clarification on that discrepancy.
So for signage, we draw a box around the whole sign. And so we wouldn't chop it up kind of into like 3 separate ones. And so whenever you add these 3 sections together, that is how I was able to get that it would equate to 19.53 square feet instead of the 14.4 square feet.
So in that case, that script would need to come down a little bit to meet that 14.5 square feet.
On the diagonal.
Yeah. Let me just suggest in that context that you work with the staff and y'all work that particular part of it out. I think the big thing for this group is that overall concept as shown in the photograph, more than the size.
You mean how it's mounted, how it's a diagonal or tilted? What do you mean? A red?
No, I mean, on the photograph of the one down in Lower Broadway, the concept of that illuminated Hattie B's on an illuminated canopy is what I think we're talking about. Because it's the same, you're doing the same, you want to do the same thing. That's what I see.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think that's the big thing, and that's where the pushback's going to come from my standpoint. Whether I could possibly live somewhat with on the diagonal, it would be, but that's. I think for me, the illumination is the big thing. I'm not going to go along with anything with the neon or the LEDs, and so it's got to be non-illuminated, and that's what our guidelines say. The same thing applies to the blade sign, whether it winds up being 6.5 square feet or whether it's 4.5 square feet, which is what I would approve. It's got to be non-illuminated. So that's what our guidelines say.
I understand that. I live in Franklin. I'm downtown all the time. I mean, we do have some lit signs. So are those grandfathered in? Are those, Gray's, the theater?
Gray's
Mellow
is a
Mushroom?
historic sign that was grandfathered in. The theater, I worked on that signage. It took a year and a half going through zoning appeals to get that approved because we were replicating a sign that had been downtown.
The rest of them would probably be external illumination with some floods.
And Mr. Chair, if I could interject for a moment, because there are guidelines that don't recommend internally illuminated signs, but that matches our zoning ordinance for these particular sign types. The zoning ordinance does not permit internally illuminated signs. So it's not something that this body can even approve if they wanted to, unless there's a modification of standards in place that specifically states that neon is permitted. I don't believe there is, because neon and LED that is visible, and I'm reading from the zoning ordinance, is not permitted. It's prohibited into the design of a sign. So lighting for these particular signs is limited to external illumination only, not internal.
Anything else?
Mr. Chair, I do have one more question for staff having to do with modification of standards. So if modification of standards does support the 6 square feet or what it is over, and the Historic Zoning Committee says we prefer to stick to the guidelines, what is required at that point?
Well, ultimately, a COA is required for a sign. So what a modification of standards does is it changes the zoning requirement to whatever that modification is. So if there is a modification that does change a sign maximum from 4.5 to 6.5 square feet, it changes the maximum sign size. That is a maximum, not a minimum or a given. It ultimately needs a COA by the Historic Zoning Commission, and that's per the review of this body. And the design guidelines list 4.5 specifically in the guidelines for these signs.
Okay, anything else? Thank you.
Can I ask one, sorry.
All right, sure.
One final clarification. So the canopy as shown seems to be acceptable
Yeah,
minus
yeah.
the neon band and the signage.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I think we're fine there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, next, consider demolition and new construction at 425 Boyd Mill Avenue. If they're gonna go across the country, this is, if they're gonna go across the country, we're minor compared to what they're going into.
Well, they've got other iterations.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for
Good
giving
afternoon.
us your time today. We're Nick and Stephanie Bach. We live at 425 Boyd Mill Avenue. Some of you may know the property as Dr. Gaines' house. This is the original home from the parcel that was sold to create the Benelli Park subdivision, which was built behind the home. We purchased the property in 2017 after the Benelli Park subdivision, 2015, after the Benelli Park subdivision had already been established. Behind the home, which is the second photograph down, sits a shed at the end of our driveway. It is not original to the year that the home was built. Oops. Again.
There you go. When it's green, it's on. You can let go.
Oh, I can just leave it. Oh, good. Okay. It is not original to the same time period as the home itself, but it is, of course, part of the history of the property. It may have been used as a garage at one point in time. It is not able to be used as a garage now. Sometime during the course of the development behind the property, that building was shortened, and you can see in the photographs here, somehow that building was shortened to meet the easement requirements between our property and the property behind us. Whether or not that was done under the table, I don't know. That was long before our time. But the result is that we're not able to use it as a garage. And so our proposal is requesting the demolition of that particular outbuilding and then the development of a proper garage to store our vehicles with some living space above it at a smaller percentage of the footprint.
Just to give you a reference to it, it looks like about 2 feet were taken off the back. So it was sizable. It wasn't, small.
So you can see our proposed addition or proposed would take that building out. And then the next photograph or image shows the development of a one and some story building in the back to house 3 vehicles and then a partial living space above it, taking into consideration that there would be dormered space up there, so the footprint above would be less than the footprint below in terms of square footage or livable square footage. We did take into consideration the arts and crafts style of the original home, and so the drawings that we have here reflect a similar style to that, including the materials that we would intend to use on the exterior and the shape of the dormers, which match the shape of the existing dormers on the primary home. And then these are just kind of showing the interior first floor square footage and upper square footage. These are just interior. We're playing around a little bit. This is kind of our first pass at bringing an idea forward. We have not been before the board before, as you probably know. And so we're just trying to sort of dip our toe in and understand, hey, are we even close to being on base here, or do we have a little bit more thinking to do as relates to the ask?
Our thought process on this too was to kind of not only to create a usable garage, but also stay with the time period of the house and almost make it look like a time period carriage house to go in the back.
Okay, staff.
Thank you. The existing structure, don't have a date on it exactly. It does appear to be older. I would guess older than 50 years. That's just a pure guess without actually getting inside the building. Just based on some quick research, I do think it was modified at some point, and if anyone has any additional background information on something that might have gone through with this particular structure, please let us know. I went back to our historic imagery. These are aerial shots that we do of the city over time, just to show how it changes through the years. This is that structure in question, and you can see some sort of additional something on the back of it. What that is specifically, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's just an addition they put on at some point, or if it's a little patio back there. Again, I don't know specifically, but there was something on the rear of this structure at some point that is now no longer there. So again, it's really kind of difficult to specify its time of construction or its specific connection to the house. It does appear to be, well, go back to the main photo. It does appear to be shallow to not deep enough to hold a car of any sort, even older cars, which were much longer than modern cars. So
The existing measurements of somewhere in that file, it's the existing footprint of that building. I think it's 16 by something.
Okay.
Measurements are there.
And again, just kind of going back in, you can see the more modern lumber construction on that rear wall. So again, I think this was modified at some point, whether that went through historic zoning or not. I couldn't really speak to that. But going to what the applicant has proposed, it's a three-car garage with two dormers, 1.5-story structure. I think the biggest question I have is overall height and how it relates to the main house. The idea is to keep any sort of new accessory structure subordinate to the main structure, principal structure, so it is not confused as a house behind a house, which also this kind of covered stoop area, I think also kind of leans to that more, giving it as more prominence than an accessory structure really, as it relates to the main structure. But it is lap siding, looks like a metal seam roof with dormers and window configuration to be similar to that of the main house.
Can you pull up the photograph of the main house? So the main house itself it's a 2-story home, as you probably all know the property very well. They're 11-foot ceilings. So in terms of just vertical height, we're not going to come anywhere close to the vertical height of the main house with the accessory building.
And because of the construction of Benelli Park, this is now a corner lot. So if I go to the street view, it would be visible. It is a fairly deep lot, even with all the changes through the years. But you can see the existing structure back here. So the new accessory structure would be visible from the road, but given kind of the configuration of the lot, it's difficult to place a new detached garage, without either it being visible or the applicants losing the use of their backyard. So it's a little difficult to place a new structure without either removing or demolishing the existing accessory structure that's currently there today.
Okay, well, there are two pieces to this. Number one will be the demolition. So let's start with that.
Shall I go?
Please.
Okay.
I figured you may want to speak.
Right. I'm sorry. I keep being the one who gets to talk about demolition as everybody else says. So from everything I've heard, it's definitely a historic structure if it's 1950, because we're looking back 50 years. And there are lots and lots of people in the city of Franklin who would love to do this with their accessory structures because they want more space that's more usable. what I have not heard at all tonight, and I would really encourage y'all to go look at the guidelines on demolition. Have you all read those yet? Okay. It's really particular. Like, there are 3 approaches, and you have lots of stuff you have to do to even get to the point where the ask is really appropriate, including engineering opinions and things like that. So the fact that an accessory structure, I mean, it appears to be in good shape, at least from what I can see. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look like it's falling down, but I would encourage you to read those, because until you tick the boxes, and each different approach has different criteria. So I'd look at it very carefully and go through and say, which one are we going under, or multiple, and then go through and analyze it, because you're going to need some support and some analysis. Because if it were as easy as it not being functional, there'd be a lot of accessory structures in downtown Franklin that are replaced with, 3-car garages with living space over them. So I think to make that application, you really have to look at that. That's my take on it.
Go ahead, Kathy.
First off, I want to tell y'all thank you for coming to us at this stage and not razzing this building and then coming afterwards and say, "Ooh, I'm sorry, I did not know." So thank you for bringing this to us so we can kind of like dive in and guide. So
right.
100%. Yeah. Mr. Denton's spot on about that. Look at what is required. This is a historical building. We don't take demolition lightly, so it's a touchy thing when you come to us to say demo. But thank you for not knocking it down and then come see us.
Did anybody else have anything they want to add differently?
I do. Just say to Mr. Chair that, first of all, that I think this is one of the craftsman treasures in Franklin. It's a great home. And when you look at the gables on the front of the house and then the garage or the outbuilding, they're identical. I would say it was probably built the same time as the house. So the question that I would have is, since we know it's been modified, and usually don't support moving buildings, but since it's been modified, it might be a thing to do. Is there a way to move the building? I know there's an ordinance with the city of Franklin. If you're in the R4, you can have a second accessory structure that's, 200 square feet? Or a way to incorporate it into your new garage. And those are the things that I would consider with this building, because as Mr. Denton said, I couldn't support demolition on this particular building.
If it turns out that the building is from the 1960s, which
It's not.
we're told it was,
That's
from some developers, and they said they could tell from the nails and stuff that's in it, would that make a difference?
Mr. Chair, of course it'd make a difference if it were not that old. But my memory, I'm not going to totally trust my memory on this, but I think I recall that when Benelli Park was done, there was a special effort made that this would keep standing when the plans were done, that this shed would stand. So, I mean, I don't know how old it is, and staff can go out and look at it, but I would fall in line with what Brian said. If there was a way to be creative with it and still get what you want, that's the direction. I think your house is such a treasure, and thank you all for taking care of it.
All right, anybody else? You got anything? I mean, I don't know that there's any reason to go into the new structure until we get this resolved, because this is step one. And staff can give you copies, or you can go online and see what the demolition criteria is. And it, as Mr. Denton said, it's pretty extensive as to what the requirements are. So,
Mr. Chair, if I could request just kind of get a general gauge from the committee members here this evening, what they would think about relocation.
Sure. yeah, if you can work that out, then I think that's fine.
Relocation somewhere else on our property or relocation elsewhere in the city of Franklin? That's two different things.
On the property. Yeah.
I mean, we're on half an acre. By the time you move it, there's nothing left of the yard. So I don't think moving is an option. Whether we can incorporate it or not is a different question.
Or incorporated, as Mr. Laster said, incorporated in what you want to do.
And you do see examples of that.
And those are
Yeah.
ideas just to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I think you're pretty clear on where that we are on the demolition, just pure demolition. So I think the relocation on the property or incorporating in what you want to do would be options.
So the fact that it was changed, the back was certainly changed 2 feet, taken off. That still it still falls into that historic, even though they changed
Yes.
that completely?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know when that was done.
It was done when they bought it.
I don't remember. I don't think this commission dealt with that, but anyway.
Okay. The only other question I have is, and I learned a little bit listening to percentage of property to the lot and so on and so forth
Yeah,
tonight. Concerns about the size of what we would like to do in relation to the lot itself or the permanent property, the home? Is that something we should keep in mind is my question.
Well, yeah, you've got setback requirements.
Oh, yeah. And
No, I mean-
I'll
Yeah.
speak to that. So lot coverage is 35% lot coverage, meaning the footprint of the total building. So not square footage in terms of first and second floor, just the footprint. That does not include driveways, hardscape. It's just the footprint of the building. And the guidelines recommend no more than 35% of the lot.
Thank you. All right, next item is discussion of addition on the rear at 236 Public Square. Robin Hood is back again. Joy. Oh, we'll let Mr. Hood talk first.
Hi, I'm Robin Hood with Crossroads Architecture. We are here again for 236 Public Square, where we are doing an interior renovation and a second floor addition for the project. After our last meeting with you guys, we were in agreement that we did need to do some things on what I call the west elevation, which would be visible from 3rd Avenue. And I guess if we jump right to the A 2.0A sheet, basically what we did is one of y'all's suggestions was to wrap the columns that were supporting that second floor. And so we did do that. And then also with masonry piers, and then created a little bit of an arch above that, just again to kind of pick up on some of the architecture of the windows. The double line that you see on the west elevation is it's a double roll-lock course to match the existing double roll-lock course above the windows. So really that was the kind of the biggest change. We did offset the new addition based on comments and design guidelines off the original structure. So we did do that as well. And then I believe there was some discussion about relocating some of the 3 of the existing windows that were going to be part of the that were going to be covered basically by the new addition, and we're still proposing that we would like to relocate those if possible on the west elevation. So I did do a second option, which I'm not a big fan of, but I wanted to throw a couple ideas out just for you guys. So anyway, that's what I have.
Okay, Joey.
Thank you. My comments are pretty much largely the same as last time. This is a really unique location. It is a highly visible area of the building because it is at essentially the intersection of Public Square and 3rd Avenue North. And you can see especially from this vantage point. I can zoom in here. So this is the back of the building in question, and here's the sidewalk that connects to Public Square. So it'd be highly visible just from the public view. If this was the next block down, mid-block, I think there might be some more forgiveness, but this is highly visible. I will say the applicant has incorporated several comments from the last meeting, including the windows and the offset and the incest to further differentiate the addition from the historic portions of the building. It is certainly kind of the first of its kind of sorts to have a second floor addition hovering over, not hovering, but built over existing parking spaces. One thing we did want to note that the additions to, especially our downtown core, cannot take away existing spaces. However, if they do work it out to where they can have, what's the word I'm trying to think of, Kelly? Shared parking? Is that? Or offsite? Yes, alternate parking plan, offsite parking, to keep those two spaces for that use of the building, but just locate them elsewhere. That could potentially be an option as well, but that would be up to the applicant to seek that arrangement.
Okay. Who wants to start? Go.
Two options. Which is your favorite? I'll ask you the same question.
Option A is my favorite.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's the one that has the most changes from last time you came?
Yes, ma'am. It's
before
very
us?
different. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think proportionally, I think the proportions look really nice. It's attractive. we're not trying to do too much to that elevation because it is the rear of the building, but to add a little bit to that, I think it's a handsome elevation, and proportionally, I feel like it feels right. So that's.
Thank you.
Okay, others?
It is an improvement. You've done a good job.
Thank you.
I have to ask a question about brick color. So if you were to do this, how will you blend this color into the original brick?
So I will do some further investigation on that. We were talking with the general contractor the last couple of weeks about locating some companies that have existing brick that we could use that would be real close to this or as close to it as possible. So obviously that would be our next step, is to try to match that. And I would want to, I guess if y'all find favor in this particular elevation, that would be one of the next steps, is for us to actually kind of look into that just a lot deeper. And for when we go for our COA, is to have that information for y'all at that time.
No.
I agree with everyone. It's an improvement. I like the concept of, giving people downtown some opportunity to become, to change their space a little bit. Because we want people to use them, not go somewhere else. But just the visibility of this, it's not really at the corner. You're kind of penalized for the corner being a smaller building. Is this something we're going to see more of? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know what that does to the alley. If you go the next block over, behind the Spice Shop and some of those, there's a whole lot going on down that alley, and some of which has building behind it, some of which has parking. So I'm as a whole in favor of finding ways to creatively use the alleys so that we can keep these spaces full of tenants and owners, and allow us to be a little more strict up front so we protect that, but give people some flexibility on the back. So that's my thought. I think what you've done is, like I said, an improvement. It we see this form and banks and things. It's kind of different here, but it's in the alley, and there's all kinds of peculiarities in alleys. So I think it's the right place for it if we're going to allow something like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Mary?
I concur with what Tyler's saying. We did do a brick addition on the back of the Franklin Theater, but it came, but it came straight down. But the brick, we just sought to do something that was quiet, that blended in with other things that were in that area. So,
But you blended rather than matched.
we did.
It's a big difference. Yeah.
I mean, you'll probably encounter some problems. We did. The way this is looking, it looks like you're making it taller than the building, but I don't think you are. Is that correct?
The addition is taller. The parapet's taller because we're going to have some rooftop HVAC that we're having to hide. So it's probably a couple of feet taller.
How's that going to translate from the front?
You wouldn't see it from the front.
You won't see it?
No, ma'am, you wouldn't see it from the front. It's not going to exceed the front parapet height. It would not exceed that.
Okay.
But how would that appear from the sides if you're on 3rd Avenue North?
So if you're on 3rd Avenue, what you would see
Slightly.
actually if you're looking at that west elevation, it'll probably match because the parapet steps down. If you look at that, it steps down. So we would match the top, the highest point, but as you come out, it would just come straight out. And then as you would turn down the alley, it would stay that same height. If that makes sense.
I think we're going to want staff and us to see real details of how that looks.
Gotcha. Okay.
I would add to your brick discovery to consider the mortar.
The mortar?
The mortar.
Yes, ma'am.
Since you're matching brick to existing.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I might add, it might be also help the commission and staff kind of get a better idea of how this will look from various perspectives, if 3D renderings could possibly be made from a couple of just different perspectives showing how it will relate to the current structure.
Especially, I think it's related to the, I don't know what the gray building at the corner. Because I think that's a key element. Because it looks 3-4 feet taller.
It is. Yes, sir. It is.
And just from staff's perspective, so they're okay on setbacks. Is that right? I mean, because there's no setback. I mean, it's, yeah, on the addition piece.
That would be part of our full review.
I think we need to know the answer to that. I know it's not necessarily something that we're, as a commission, concerned about, but if it's going to turn out that we do all this and then we find out, oh, you have a 5-foot rear setback, we may be getting the cart before the horse on that.
Yeah, we can certainly include that.
I mean, I know because they own all 4 parking spots. So I know on the side, I can't imagine that's not okay because it's the full width of the building next door. But from the back, and maybe you know the answer to that. I'm sure you all have looked at that.
Well, and then this is stopping short of the current rear addition form. There is an offset that actually breaks.
Yes.
So,
but it's pretty. If it's a setback issue separate, then that's
I have not discovered a setback.
No rear setback.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all.
All right, we're ready for the next one, discussion of alterations at 435 Boyd Mill Avenue. Another Boyd Mill. Popular, it is a popular street. What would a meeting be without Boyd Mill?
Well, so I'm glad you got the picture up, because I think that this house doesn't look historic, because it was built in 1970.
Is your mic on? Hit the button and so you're green. And then you're Ms. Stoll?
I'm Ms. Stahl, yes, and these are the Studers, or the owners of the new house. So what we're proposing is, since it's such a lovely street, we wanted to make it look more historic and add on a whole front porch so they could sit out and look at the view and all that. And this little porch that they have on there now was added later, as we were told, after 1978, 79, when the developer built this building. So what we're proposing, if y'all want to scroll down to the front, or to the plans, I guess, yes. We have several little options, but the first two are pretty similar, but we like the smaller dormer on the left than the big one. So if you scroll down to the next one, yes, that one. And so we like that architecture. We think it makes it fit into the city a little better. And I've actually seen those same arches in another part of downtown Franklin. It was on your all's website. And we thought that one could fit into it for the frontage. And we just think, and then they could sit out on the front porch and enjoy, watching everybody walk down the street on Boyd. And so then the next one is just another one that we really like, that we think fits in with the city. It's a 2-story. It would be similar to like a little flat roof going over the top, and then having the dormer, because we want to be able to add on a master bath over the garage. And what we're planning on doing is extending the existing garage that's there and then just bringing it down and making it a dormer. We just think it adds more to the house and to the neighborhood, and it fits in more with it. So, y'all have anything to add? And I know you all have your guidelines, and I've read them, I've looked at them, and, I know y'all don't like to change the frontage of the buildings, but I just think that this looks more historic than what the developer built in 78 or 79, whenever he built it.
What's the age of the house?
I think it was built in 78 or 79.
Okay, all right.
So a developer, I think he bought like 2 lots or something, and I think it was before your time, before your all's committee, and so that's what we want to do.
Okay, staff?
So this principal building is considered a colonial revival, and it was constructed in 1978, which makes the building 45 years old. The National Register criteria for evaluation provided for the recognition of historic places that achieve significance within the past 50 years. A property of that age may be eligible of its exceptional importance at the national, state, or local level. So the dwellings that are located in the Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District consist of a diverse collection of colonial revival, folk Victorian, craftsman, ranch, and bungalow residences that were constructed in the early through mid 20th century. For options 1 and 2, they lean kind of more toward a farmhouse style. And then the third option, it leans toward more of a Greek revival style, which this isn't typical to the Boyd Mill Avenue district. And staff would like the commission's interpretation for this building, for the age of it, and what they would consider, if they would consider it to be historic or not historic, since it's on the 45-year kind of cusp, and 50 is the definite answer, if it is historic or not.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank
if it's 50 years old, is that what you,
Yeah, all right. Who wants to start? Comments? Mary.
I'll make a comment. I'm not opposed to a porch going on it. It is on the cusp of being old, but I would not be opposed to that. I think the simpler, the better. I don't think we have 2-story porches on Boyd Mill, so I don't think we want to make it be the first thing you look at.
Okay.
So I would say simpler, 1-story porch, don't have a problem with it. I think the dormer on the front, don't like it.
You don't like it? Okay.
I feel like it just isn't something you see, and I would want to see that be on the back.
Okay.
That'd be my comment.
Would you be opposed to extending that garage roof, though, so we could get that height on the back and get a dormer?
What do you mean by extending it?
Go to the side, that side elevation.
Get it higher?
Mm-hmm. See where I've got a dashed in line there, and so we wanted to. The bottom one reaches there. It's like 2 gables, and then one's just slightly lower than the other. So we'd like to extend that, and then we could just extend it all the way down.
If it stayed lower than the main form.
Than the main house. Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Who's next?
I can go. I definitely agree with staff that the single-story porch is definitely probably more appropriate for this house. I think there's kind of a mixture of stylistic things going on when you add that gable on the central mass. I think keeping it really simple with just the porch, and there's a lot of columns because there's a lot of windows, and I know you're spacing it that way, but they maybe seem heavy for that spacing to me. And I think that's, if we're gonna say we're gonna create something that feels a little more appropriate, I think the column width is, without telling you how to design it.
Just maybe do
they're
4
little-
instead of lose 6.
No, I think the 6
or-
is fine if you're a little skinnier.
Okay.
I think if
see.
they're that big, then 6 looks like a lot. It's a whole bunch of column.
Okay.
The dormer in the garage, I think what you were saying a minute ago, and I'm not sure Mary picked up on it, was you're talking about raising the eave height of the garage
No.
to find that space up there?
Well, just extending the roof line like I did on the drawing there, and then I stopped the dormer, but this way I would extend it back down and bring the front of the garage dormer or the roof up.
That's what I'm saying, the eave line of the garage.
Yeah, the eave line would
move
raise,
up.
but it won't go higher than the
Yeah.
house.
I'm not sure I would be on board with that, just because that mass would all of a sudden become, even if the roof is just below it, it's still like a 2-story front wall.
Yeah, well, that way we
I
see.
don't,
Yeah,
I don't
see how-
mind the dormer. I think, again, like little things like the proportion of the dormer make it feel like it's maybe not historically accurate. So the window scale, there's a lot of wall above the window in that dormer. I'm looking at whichever one this is. Page 6.
Sorry, is that the taller one?
No, yeah.
So
we
right
did-
there, the window scale
Yes.
is
Option 2.
really short for a dormer. When we look at historic dormers, the windows fill most of the wall and don't have a whole lot of siding and such above them. So it's those little things. I think if you
Okay.
could work out the details of that, I don't have a problem
But you
with
don't
the
have-
dormer.
okay.
If it's scaled appropriately, but I wouldn't want to see that front wall of the garage get 6 feet tall.
No, I wouldn't either.
That would be,
Okay.
that would be
That's what was going to
a
happen.
problem.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that's my
Okay,
comments.
so you would be okay with the front dormer if we
Yeah,
made it more
it's scaled
proportionally like
appropriately.
the one down
or
the
two
street?
smaller
or-
ones centered,
okay.
which probably doesn't help you volume wise.
Yeah.
But it would look really good centered up over the window.
Right. Right. Thank you.
All right, Brian, do you got anything?
I'm just, given the height of the current side addition, it'd be hard to get a dormer on that, wouldn't it, without raising the roof line?
In the back, or you mean on
In the front.
Yeah, you had to raise the roof line in order to get any to build out on that over the garage, to get them a master bath up there.
My concern would echo what Tyler says, that the volume of that seems to really detract from the main house as that roof line gets higher. It looks like a lot more mass. It looks to me as the people, I know we say colonial revival, but definitely they've gone colonial revival, almost a clap federal kind of a style is
Yeah,
what
that's
what they've really gone for. And I'm wondering, how you could, if you've thought about maybe trying to, use that element and get more what you want, and yet somehow try to keep some of that style. I mean,
The
that would
federal
take
style.
a whole rethink about it. May have to get a larger porch, some style. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, but he's talking about that style, the federal, that's just following that pattern instead of changing it to more about what we're trying to, like showing with the little arches and the columns, I think is what he's saying. Just make it, but still have a porch, yeah.
I do think that when you turn,
I don't think y'all oppose the porch at all, so.
when you turn on Boyd Mill off of, I forget what street that is, 12th. Anyway, isn't there kind of a little farmhouse looking house right on the very corner?
I think there is. It's at 415 Boyd, I think, and it's, I think that's right.
It's been completely rebuilt, but I think it is, there is something there like that. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I'll just say one thing. With what Brian says, I agree. Trying to give it a farmhouse vibe, I don't see that.
Yeah, we didn't mean to do
It
that.
doesn't look like a farmhouse, does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a farmhouse. And then hearing you all say farmhouse,
And it's like,
we
okay.
can accomplish that. 'Cause I didn't want a farmhouse.
All right,
Okay.
anybody? I don't have anything to add, so I think we're good.
Okay, so what,
You
we
gotta-
just go back to the drawing board? Oh.
Now, Jim.
Pardon me?
So when you
Oh,
come,
Kathy.
when you come back to us, pick one option
Okay.
and
Make it-
and go for it and
Okay.
combine all the elements that we've been discussing here
Okay.
to the particular, if it is federal-esque, and then maybe if we see some streetscape, like what are the other homes around there reflective of, and how that appearance is from the street.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Staff would encourage you to come back to another design review committee meeting with that proposal rather than going straight to historic zoning.
Okay.
Just so that we can have a round table informal feedback discussion like we did tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we're ready for the next one. New construction at 405 Fifth Avenue North. What a team. What a team. We'll get it after this. Go ahead.
I'm Greg Gamble, and presenting to you tonight a very unique collaborative proposal between several nonprofits who are pursuing affordable housing at the Hill, directly adjacent to the Toussaint Cemetery. Here with Mike Hathaway, our architect, who's been working with the collaborative group on the elevations of the architecture. We are at the beginning of the development plan process. We're seeking your recommendation to the Planning Commission on our plan. We are showing architectural elevations. We do have the site plan in here, but final review of the architecture will come back to you after development plan approval for certificate of appropriateness for these areas that relate specifically to the historic district. I have paper copies if anybody would like a paper copy. I know sometimes the screens are a little bit challenging, but if you want one, they're here. I think Kathy has one already, accidentally. This property is located just directly adjacent to the Sonic. It's the old city kind of utility operations. The building's now been removed. The city's building's been removed. It's now a concrete and asphalt slab, more or less. Along Hillsborough Road, there is a retaining wall that's approximately 35 feet tall. Despite that, Hillsborough Road is still a frontage street for us. We have to have architecture that faces that roadway. If you mind going to the next slide. Our access will come off of Hillsborough Road directly adjacent to Sonic, and we're proposing a new public street that will run north-south. That'll be dedicated right away to the city. There will be a loop road that will have an internal formal open space park in the middle of that loop road. There will be some on-street parking, although it'll be minimal around that. At the end of that street, you see a small parking lot. That is a parking lot that the Housing Authority has been talking with, and Hard Bargain has been talking with the owners of the adjacent cemetery about having some additional guest parking there. They really don't have that right now. So that would be a guest parking location. At the end of that parking lot area, there will be an emergency access gate to allow fire department vehicles and police to access during an event of an emergency. To get access to the asphalt drive that is within the cemetery. Our fire truck has driven it. They agree that the historic columns on the cemetery do not need to be moved. Mount Hope Street happens to be wide enough that the fire truck can actually make the turn without causing any problems to the columns, so there will be no changes to the cemetery property or its drives or its columns, but we will have an emergency connection in that location. There are townhome building types that front onto Hillsborough Road. The larger rectangles on the two buildings on the end, those are 1 story. All of these units, all these homes are 3-bedroom. So those will be 1 story, 3-bedroom, and then there will be 2-story townhomes that are in between, sandwiched in between the two 1 stories. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The more brown colored buildings that show the 4, 2 in front, 2 in the back, those are also 2-story units and will all have 3 bedrooms. Those are the multiplex building type. They actually have 2 public or doors, private doors that front to the front and 2 that front to the back. They share a party wall both in the middle and on the back. And then there are 5 townhomes located along the north. Those do back up to the cemetery, not the historic cemetery, but to the Mount Hope Cemetery. Those will have, they're all historic.
I just want to say, yeah, I would guess if I submitted an application that would be.
Would be historic.
Yes.
It will have a 6-foot masonry wall along the property line, giving privacy and to the residents in those townhomes. We have a 75-foot historic buffer that will be planted landscape that follows along the Toussaint Cemetery. And then our parking will be screened from view and hidden behind the architecture and behind the 75-foot buffer. There is a historic demarcation line that kind of crosses through the middle of the property. A portion of this property is within the historic district and a portion of this property is outside of the historic district. I'm not sure of the history of that line, but we are respecting that in the sense of providing that historic buffer where the guidelines require. We had a conversation with you a few months ago about submitting a reduced buffer less than 75 feet and not doing a modification of standards on parking. We are going to be pursuing a modification of standards on parking to reduce that required parking down slightly so that we can accommodate the full 75-foot historic buffer and landscape requirement along that edge. So we're not going to be asking for a reduction on that historic buffer this time. On, I think, the next couple of slides then, You can keep going. This is the existing conditions of the site. You can see the 75-foot buffer crosses over into the existing concrete pad. That concrete will be removed and then landscape will be planted. And Mike, I'll hand it over to you and you can kind of talk through the elevations.
Greg, wait a minute. Talk about the 6-foot wall that evidently goes on top of that retaining wall. Is that what I'm seeing?
No. Because Hillsborough Road sits below the existing ground plane by about 35 feet, we have a requirement in the ordinance that front yard fences cannot exceed 30 inches, I believe. Is that right, Kelly? Top of
Okay,
my head?
33 feet.
3.5.
3 feet.
36 inches.
Right, yeah.
We need a safety barrier along that wall. So this is proposed 6-foot non-climbable metal picket fence that's going to be recessed back to the right-of-way line, which is further back in than the top of the retaining wall. And because of that, we're having to ask for special consideration on that fence.
So it would sit below this retaining wall, is that right?
No, it's at the top.
It's to prevent somebody from falling off the
Right,
retaining wall.
okay,
Yeah,
that's what I'm.
We've got a safety
I got you.
concern
Okay.
there that
Okay, I'm with you.
we want to make it as invisible as we can by making it black metal picket.
I've got
but-
you. Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
So architecturally, as this is an affordable housing product, we are doing our best to keep it very simple. Architecturally, it's as clean and as simple as we can get, trying to create the massing so it still has some interest. We'll be using siding, horizontal hardy siding as our material, so it's long-lasting and easily maintained. We're proposing porches to give it some outdoor life as well. And there are areas where we're going to spice in some brick for the masonry, for the walls themselves, and we'll bring that back when we return to you guys. But want to have some variety as well. We'll use color as well for variety. But and then on this, the townhomes that face Hillsborough will have to have two sides to those. So that's why you see a front and back porch on those, because we're required by the zoning ordinance to have a front and a front, for lack of a better explanation. Double front, which works with the plan. On the smaller product, this is internal. So as Greg mentioned, it's basically 4 townhomes that are side to side and back to back. But it works fine with the layout. We'll have side porches instead of a rear porch. And then front porches as well. So again, the traditional character, trying to make it feel like a large home, but again, that very simple, almost folk kind of style.
Okay, staff? Joey?
Thank you. This really is a truly unique situation because the way the guidelines are written for any sort of infill residential, it really looks to the existing residential around it. And for this particular spot, the nearest other, or the adjacent structure is the Sonic, which, I mean, I lived at in high school, but no one spends their nights there. At least probably not anymore. Anyway, so this really is a very unique situation where there is no residential even within this, in the next few blocks of Fifth Avenue to compare to or to be compatible to. So my current planning brain keeps reverting back to the zoning ordinance, and in that, with that in mind, it does meet the various regulations, at least so far, in a general stance, with the various building types of the zoning ordinance. So it's kind of difficult to relay how this relates to the guidelines when there's really nothing else to compare this particular site to. So I'm happy to answer any questions as best as I can, but we'll just kind of go on this journey together.
Well, let me just say, this has been a long time coming. And I know that a lot of work has been done on this property, but to have 3 I think it's 3 nonprofits that have come together and formed a collaborative partnership to put this together. And I think it's great. It's been a long time coming, and I think it's well worth moving forward through the process. So I think you've touched on about everything you could touch on. So, Kathy.
Joey, to kind of go along with what you're talking about with infill residential, half the site, well, some of it is in the overlay and some of it's not. So is that another layer that affects how we look at this?
Well, it's my understanding that only really this stretch of townhomes to the north and then this multiplex building that are within the historic preservation overlay would require a COA later for the specific addition and construction documents. But because it is partially within the overall property, it still requires a preliminary recommendation from the historic zoning to go with the development plan.
Okay. Can I also ask staff too, Joey, like what Mike has submitted as far as like elevations of the and express the simplicity of it? Does staff feel that this is something that would fit with an infill residential, since we don't have another residential building to kind of compare it to in the area?
I think it certainly meets the regulations of the various building types of the zoning ordinance. And again, that's where it kind of gets a little dicey when there's just nothing else to compare to, historically speaking.
Is the closest infill the one that's over by the cemetery on the other side of 96? That's all blue now. It's like a blue. I remember we saw that when we did our tour.
Blue, what do you mean? Like
It's
the apartment complex?
It's a commercial.
The apartments.
Yeah. Is it?
And they painted them. It's a real pleasant color.
Yeah. But it's next to the cemetery across the street, closer to downtown.
The Whitney?
Yes.
The Whitney
Was that it?
Apartments? Okay.
You're good.
Okay. Kathy, do you have anything else?
I think what you've shown us so far looks good. My concern would be height, since the elevations that are up on the screen right now, that's the highest point of the property. So, I know you'll develop that more for us to see. But I think it looks good.
Mary?
Yeah, I've had a couple of citizen comments about there being some screening to Mount Hope to respect that cemetery as well. I guess that's why I jumped in so quick and said that, Greg, that the work just hasn't been done to nominate that to the National Register. But I think in my opinion, it would probably be eligible. So some screening respect to that. At one moment in time, the National Trust did a session on inappropriate land use showing the apartments across the street from Mount Hope Cemetery. So it made their national conference. That was good and embarrassing. So I think just every consideration to landscaping, I think building colors, we don't control that, but I would just say as a citizen, Mike and I have tried to work on that before, and it matters. So everything matters. It's a sensitive location. Thank you.
I was going to say, we don't see plans here necessarily. I see you've broken up the massing with roof forms and such, but it looks like, on the drawing, aside from the porch, it's just a big rectangle. And I know you're talking about, keeping things simple, but I also know that these kind of applied trim details on one box, like a corner board that's not really on a corner and things like that, they're useful mechanisms, but they can also come off as ineffective in terms of breaking up the mass, because it looks good on a drawing, but when you get out there, it's like, oh, this is a giant rectangle. So whatever you can do to really break things in some strategic places, I think would be helpful. I would be disappointed with the massing if I show up and it's just applied trim details on one big box. I think it would look too massive and sort of cheap feeling, and you know, I want it to be a nice project for the people who are going to live there and for everybody has to look at it. So.
Okay, who else?
So I
Brian?
just want to make sure that you know, I understand what's going on. So the buildings that are nearest the retaining wall, those will be single story?
No.
2 stories.
They're 2-story. And what represents, you know, I was just trying to figure out what actually represents how they look on the plans.
The top elevation here would be the front facing Hillsborough Road. The bottom elevation would be the back, which would be facing the 6-foot masonry wall and the cemetery. Did I say that correctly, Mike?
That's right.
So all the buildings will look like this.
We're showing you here the building that's circled in yellow at the top left.
But that's representative of all of them.
It's representative of the architectural character. Along Hillsborough Road, the 2 buildings in the middle will look like these 2. The 2 buildings that are on the sides will have 1 story and then transition to 2-story in the middle and then 1 story on the sides. It's a little bit different from a character standpoint.
And
That's not in your packet. We're
Staff-
showing you the architecture that's in your review. Yeah.
Yeah, because those buildings are not in the historic.
They're not in the historic district.
That's right.
They're on the
ones
outside.
closest to Hillsborough Road. So-
Sorry to be confusing.
Cemetery side.
Staff asked the applicant to only include the buildings that were in the HBO to try to avoid confusion, but you know.
But we got it.
We got there anyway.
You got to put your lettering, the historic thing in the right box.
So tell me again, where the single family are, they're actually on the Hillsborough Road side?
The
With
1
single
story.
story.
Single
and they
story
go
is
up
on the
to
hill.
2.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
That was my main question. And
Yeah,
thank you.
we just wanted to keep it low profile if we can and going along the view shed of the hill. That's one of the things we've heard is pretty important. At our last BOMA work session, we presented this master plan along with some of the architectural elevations to the board and mayor and aldermen. There was a lot of frustration that we're not achieving higher density given this opportunity. And we're really challenged to explore taller buildings, bigger buildings, more mass, more density. The Franklin Housing Authority, Community Housing Partnership, Habitat for Humanity, and Hard Bargain groups all feel very comfortable with building and delivering, constructing, and managing what you're seeing in front of you. I think it would be good to have a voice from Historic Zoning Commission this is not necessarily for tonight, but to consider. But something in your comments at the voting meeting as you're making a recommendation about massing scale, density, and kind of fitting into the fabric of what's right here. I think it would be important for us to hear that as applicants and important for Planning Commission and BOMA to hear it as well.
All right, does anybody want to comment on that?
I guess I'll go. I would say, speaking to the area that's within the historic overlay, I would be concerned about putting anything more towering or denser right there adjacent to the historic cemetery.
And I said, I think it's a very sensitive location. So I appreciate that there's not more massing than there is. It's a highly elevated location. It is a high visibility location from the cemetery. It's a high visibility location from the 2 cemeteries, actually. So.
Okay, anybody else? And I'm very comfortable with the density as shown.
Thank you all for your input. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, why don't we've been in here for 2.5 hours. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Hey, Mike, speak to Mike.
Count them down. 5.
4, 3, 2, 1. We're back on? All right, good. All right, we're ready for our next one. Discussion of demolition at 119 Church Street.
Thank
Liggins.
you. Yeah, Matt Ligon. We've come before you to ask for a demolition permit on this home. It's recently had storm damage from some of the high winds we had. A large limb, about 2 feet in diameter, has fallen on the middle of the house and basically crushed it in. You can't see it from the street, but you can see it from the back, and you can view it from 2nd Avenue. If you look down between 2 houses, you'll see the tree that's laying in the middle of the house. The house is in pretty poor condition, as it was originally built without any true footer or foundation, just on rocks and just a few inches off the ground. It currently has aluminum siding around it. Where the trees fallen on it, it has exposed what was under that, and that was just an asphalt shingle brick type of material. It's built as a duplex, fairly small. Half of that duplex has not been occupied for many, many years, just because of lack of floor and plumbing on it. But it's in very poor condition. At some point, block was put around the exterior of the property just to block it off. Most of it is just metal that goes down and covers it for it to be under it. But it's, I think, as you see from the pictures from the report from the engineer, that it's on the ground. If he's got and I have additional pictures, but if he's got the gas meter on the side where gas was added, the gas actually, they don't go under the house. They run it around the side of the house and take it in the wall. I can tell you it's, from talking to many of the neighbors, especially the brownstones, they would very much like to see this cleaned up and removed. I do think it's a nuisance from the appearance of it. It's not safe. It's not safe to go in. Insurance has already said, they're not fixing it. It's a complete loss. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, staff. Emily?
So the National Register describes this property as an extensively altered circa 1920 1.5-story frame gable end dwelling. The house has a metal gable roof, an interior brick chimney, and exterior of aluminum siding. And the main entrance has a single light glass and wood door, and windows are 4/4 wood sashes. A shed roof wing is on the main facade. And this property does appear on the 1928 Sanborn maps. And based on the information provided, the application doesn't fully address the design guidelines for criteria for demolition. And let me pull what the guidelines say exactly for demolition. So, as it says right here, if the structural instability or deterioration of a property is demonstrated through a report by a structural engineer or architect with demonstrated experience working with historic structures, such a report must clearly detail the property's physical condition, reasons why rehabilitation is not feasible, and cost estimates for rehabilitation versus demolition and construction of a comparable structure. In addition to this report, there should be a separate report that details future action on the site. Thank you.
Okay. Comments? Go ahead. Pardon?
Can I comment on the last thing?
Yeah.
We do not have plans currently to rebuild anything on that site. As I think most of you know, we own an acre and 3/4 on that block as that end of the block. And the city's always told us they wanted a master plan on that. We own 12 acres in that area with the silos and the property across the way. But on that side and that end of the block, I think it's an acre and a half, acre and 3/4, something like that. But that would come back to you for anything that had to be done, because it's all lies in the
So
historic overlay.
if this was to be demolished, what would you do with that property? Mow it?
Yeah, correct. If the home next to it burned many years ago, we came and y'all gave us a demo permit. It didn't burn completely to the ground, but almost to the ground. And we cleaned it up, and we fenced it, and it's just a vacant lot at this time.
Okay.
And looks better than it did when there was a house on it, in my opinion. Excuse me?
Just be vacant. It'd be, yeah.
It'd be vacant.
It would be vacant. It'd be a vacant lot, and
Yeah.
yes. But it would, I think you're going to want to see the entire area as a plan come back to you, which it's the old city garage, which is the biggest part of that lot, and it's the corner.
Okay, Josh.
I mean, my comment is just read that really closely, because I think for us to act, you've got to check the boxes. So there's stuff that's not in your engineering report that needs to be included.
And I'd like to provide just a little historic context for the building. So the Sanborn maps do show it on those maps. The Sanborn maps were created, I think, about 1928, but they were never updated as a map other than having pieces pasted into them. And if you have just a copy of that, you don't see the pasted parts. And where this particular building is located, it's pasted in. And so a man named Cicero Ewing owned the house where Diane Christian's real estate office is today. And this was part of that lot. And he sold that off about 1927. And it remained a lot, just an empty lot, up until the time Dr. Walter Giles bought it. And it looks like about 1940s. In the 40s is kind of whenever he actually did something on this spot. So it goes back to the 1940s. I think we could safely say it has been pasted into that Sanborn map. So it is not, I think we have to determine, and that's one of the things I noticed on our guidelines for that, is if the building has lost its architectural integrity, and then how it relates to the context of the neighborhood. So there's a lot to consider, I think, in whether the board votes for demolition or not.
Anybody else?
I would just say that in the guidelines, it says an engineer that has a history in reviewing historic structures, he may or may not, but that does say it in our guidelines. And there were several houses like this. At one time, we did actually have affordable housing downtown, but several of them were approved for demolition, just looking at a greater good for the context of downtown.
So what would y'all like to see? You've seen an engineer's report. There's no money involved here as far as cost to rehab.
There are things that they have to put that in there.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand. So what are we advising Matt then? Need to see some dollars to rehab it and or build new?
The comparison, I think you
And
just
to
have
compare
to
the
walk through
two.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's in bad shape. There's no question about that. So
I mean, it is not, you're going to rebuild the whole thing, and you can't use anything that's there. I mean, I'm happy for y'all to walk through and take a site visit.
But we're trying to fit.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Fit what we got to have in the guide, because this comes about every other time to us, and we go through the same spiel. So we've got to have some numbers to go along with the report.
I guess my advice would be read that demo section very closely. There are multiple paths to demolition, and make sure you don't have something missing in your application. Just like to Mary's point, like it does say the engineer needs to be somebody who's familiar with these types of things, with historic structures. And so say it out loud if that's true. And I would just walk through every piece of it and make sure you're ticking the boxes so that we have the information so that we can do our due diligence to consider it.
And I don't know, Emily, is it listed as a contributing property?
It's non-contributing.
Non-contributing.
Anything else? Tyler, you got any comments?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think we're good. Thank you. Okay. Next one will be 1843 William Campbell Court, Lot 6. Got 3 William Campbell Courts to wind us up today.
We're submitting lots 6, 9, and 11. You have had the opportunity to comment on some of these, either as we have presented the streetscape in its entirety to comment on that. And I think with specifically, you've made comments on Lot 9 and perhaps Lot 6. As with the other, the main concerns, just to review that, was the heights, making sure that the massing doesn't compete with the mansion, and to make sure that the ornament and elements on the homes also don't compete with that of the mansion. We listened to your comments. We spent a bit of time reducing heights, particularly on 6 and 9. We reduced or completely eliminated transom windows. On lots 6 and 9, we reduced the ceiling heights from 11 feet to 10 feet, reduced the ornamentation. And as the street elevation shows, the grade drops down significantly, so that by the time you're at lot 11, it's according to memory, it's 5 feet below the mansion. And so those are some global comments. So specifically with lot 6, to review the style, it's inspired by the Craftsman bungalow, which is one of the styles present in historic Franklin. Has some shingle influence, but I would say it's more of a Craftsman bungalow. Wood shingles on the main gable, on the center gable. I did a perspective sketch so that you can see how it sits on the site. The front part of the site, it's not straight across, but it coincides with the curve in the road. And so the design of the house is designed to the particularities of that site. And care was taken to try to break up the mass so it doesn't present itself at the streetscape as a monolithic facade. And and as I mentioned, the height, we took care to reduce the height by several feet, reduce roof slopes, and reduce that ceiling height. And let's see, what else? And we left the detailing is simple. so as not to compete with the mansion. And so I welcome any comments that you have on Lot 6.
Okay, Emily?
As Matt said, that this is an arts and crafts inspired building that will incorporate materials such as cedar shingles and stone, and that is not typical to the Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District. The building also has an unusual front form that's unique and not typically seen in this historic district. The front facing elevation, let's see, and the right elevation do not correlate, and maybe the applicant can help us decipher this. So right here, if we look here at the chimney and this height, and then go back to this, it just, staff was just kind of confused on, because it appears in the right elevation that the building is higher, and then once you get to the front elevation, it's just different. But we think that a 3D elevation would help understand this.
And that was because we lowered the height. And I just, because it's in process, I didn't, and because it's hand-drawn, I didn't lower the height on that side elevation. So you can see on the side elevation the height that it was at, and how much we brought that down, in particular that main roof in the center. So I apologize for the confusion that may have brought.
That's all
Did-
we
okay,
have. Yeah,
all
sorry.
right. Comments? Go ahead.
Thank you for the work on this. I know it's a lot of rework to get the height out, so I appreciate that. I think that was one of my comments before. The front elevation form is a little peculiar to me, and it's particularly evident to me in that perspective that you drew. That kind of porch that is in addition to the very front part of the house too. It seems like it stretches out, and I know that looks like it's a result of the lot really curves there, and you have a little extra lot up front there. But you know, it is an abnormal kind of form for what we see in any historic neighborhood to kind of have a wing coming off the front, and I think it's massing wise is even more so because of that porch on the front. I like the porch on the front. I think from a use standpoint, that's fantastic. But from a massing standpoint, it really sticks out pretty far. And in my mind, it might be more successful massing wise if that roof set back. Not that you couldn't have a patio, but maybe there wasn't a roof over it. That left side porch, that bedroom there. So
I almost didn't include that perspective view because it shows the earlier view. If you compare the in plan, you can see it more clearly. What I did, I said, that full porch is really blocking too much. It's too much it's coming forward too much. Right. So while there's still a roof that's about 4 feet deep, over that, it's now a terrace,
deep eave, yeah.
and it's a deep eave with some brackets.
Yeah, I think that
and so it's no longer
would be
full
more
porch.
successful here because it's that whole roof mass will push back. I don't mind the deep overhang. I think it's part of that style of architecture, but that perspective, if you pulled that back some, that would really help.
And so that's for clarity, that's as you look at this image, that's the left one that we're discussing. Or that's the one that got pulled back.
So that came back.
That came back
8 feet. Is that
So this represents
maybe not that far?
the reduction, or is this before you pulled it back?
That's before I pulled it back, and that's why I almost didn't include it because I wasn't able to do a hand redraw on that.
That's fine. I just
But I can give you an estimate of what that
It's
that
such a
is.
pretty drawing, though.
got it.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, we've got two different sets.
You know, I hate that it's
Two different
obsolete.
concepts here.
Well, when I
That's-
see that drawing, it almost looks like you want to drive a car through it. It doesn't read as a porch.
Yeah, portiche.
It looks like a portiche.
On the front, which
All right, so
is not
that's, all right, he's pulled it
But
back
this
there.
is,
Okay.
this is
Yep.
the big version. He's
Was clear out
he's
to
shrunk it
there.
down.
It would come back about
Yeah, so
seven
that's what this represents.
7 feet or so.
Okay. I think it's
All right,
helpful.
we're good.
Yeah. And then materiality, you know, we were just talking about a bungalow / craftsman across the street at Benelli Park, not in Benelli Park, but in front. So I think there's some cues to take from that. I don't mind the cedar shake necessarily if it's done well. I would.
And it would be painted. I don't like them when they jump out and they're stained, and it's the only stained element.
Yeah, that
So-
that can help, you know, tone it down a little. And then even, I think you've got annotated here, or even a material shown that you've got shake over the roof of that bay. You know, if that were even more simply detailed and it were, you know, copper or something, just even a lower slope so that it just is just the bay element, I think it can get stylistically a little to Pacific Northwest when we start doing the shake, swooping into bay roofs and things like that, and we're not that. Franklin's not that, I don't think. But those are just a couple comments. People may disagree with those, but that's my thoughts.
My reasoning was that one thing I liked about the shingle is its simplicity of form, and when I was thinking of this in its proximity to the mansion, that's why I looked at a few different options for that, and I'd be happy to look at a couple more. But I chose that approach in order to minimize the ornament in a way, even though you're right, it's not, the shingle style is not typical to Franklin. And that, I guess, is the one element on that house that would have a nod towards that, towards that style.
Can I
but-
say something to that?
Sure.
I get it, like it would visually maybe blend in, and that does make it less ornamental. But by the same token, it might feel odd for a little dormer to have that type of roofing material. Usually you see it, you know, on a broader roof instead of a little dormer type. So, but I get what you was. I could see that it could blend away, less ornamental.
So maybe to have more visual clarity, and maybe I could circle back with staff on that, and then with the presentation for historic to have a three-dimensional perspective view of that.
So your little dormers that are on the porches, is there actually living space above those?
No, they're just ornamental.
To me, they seem a little out of place. And then on the bay, again, this discussion that we had last time, is that coming out onto the porch, or does that sit back 3 foot off the eaves
It's
or the wall?
the triple bay window is coming out slightly, let's say 6 or 8 inches from the wall.
So that does not meet the guideline?
Well, it's not a dormer, however, because it's coming out from a wall surface.
But there's no part underneath it that goes to the ground like you'd see on a lot of bays. It sits almost like it's
It sits into the porch roof slightly.
and I have seen some houses in Franklin, and I think this is before the historic zoning overlay. It looks like they put an addition on the front of the gable. And I kind of get that same impression when I see the way the porches come out from it, as though it's actually, especially the one that comes out the longest, is that it's almost like an addition on the front of the house. And I'm not sure that's the way you want to convey that. And the body material, it's stone. Did I see that right? And then you have shake in the gable.
Any other comment, Brian?
Those are mine. Thank you, Mr.
Josh,
Those
do
are
you
good
have anything?
comments. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I would just ditto what Brian said. It looks like you want to take those faux dormers and put them on the real roof line of the house. I'm just not a fan of fake dormers on the front of a house, and especially in this situation, and really want to understand that second porch how that is cut back.
One other quick comment. When I'm looking at the streetscape, the other drawing that's submitted in the packet, 1843 is like in line next to the mansion. When you rework it, just consider that lineup and how it fits into that scheme. I think you're hitting some high points about less ornamentation, keeping it simple. But when I look at that elevation right there, the two little dormers really stand out as odd.
Good point.
Okay,
Anything
good.
else?
But that's a strong elevation. I like that streetscape thing.
Anybody got anything else? All right, let's move on to the next one then. 1849, William Campbell Court.
Okay, 1849. Okay. So style is, of course, a Southern classic revival style. I say it has Queen Anne influences just because of the massing and the generous, what I would call the generous proportions of it. But as you know, typical in the South, Queen Anne was often interpreted through the classical language. Since the last time you've seen this, we eliminated the transom windows, brought the ceiling height down from 11 feet to 10 feet. The roof is actually, it flattens out at the top, so it's a low, a very low pitch membrane roof at the top, and that's one way that we're keeping the overall height to where it is. I looked at that and brought the house down further by increasing the width of that area. There was a comment on the columns. I had ionic columns shown, which I really liked personally. But I think the Tuscan column works well too at the front porch, and that's a simpler expression. So it doesn't compete with the mansion in terms of its ornament. And I agree. I think it's important not to have ornament that might compete with the mansion. And so those essentially were the modifications that we've done to this. The small attic windows was simplified. And as you can see in the inspiration photos or the precedent photos, it does resemble a home. It's actually located somewhere in Alabama. So there's kind of a direct precedent for that. So I welcome your comments or ideas on this.
Okay, any staff?
Yes. Couple clarifications. Are the doors in this upper portion in line with the doors in the lower portion, and this is a balcony that's the depth of the porch, or does this hang over the front porch at all?
It hangs, that second floor hangs over the front porch. And it might be helpful to take a glance at that precedent photo.
That's not
to
what this
kind of
shows.
see what that.
Did this one?
No, the one on the
This one?
left. I take it back. That's a good question. I apologize, I don't have the answer right now.
Because looking at the side,
It is flush. It is
Okay.
flush with the
yeah.
front wall of the house.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought. Because looking at this elevation, it looked flush, but I know that kind of wraps around the porch. It was just a little hard to tell, so I wanted to clarify. Also, on the floor plan, it looks like the porch is curved, but then everything else looks like it's cornered.
I think that's just a discrepancy between what's in the computer and what
Okay.
Matt is sketching, so we'll get that updated.
Okay, but it is cornered, so it's not, okay.
Yeah.
Not
Overall, I really don't have too much to add to this one. The overall height is 32 feet 9 inches according to the streetscape right over here. It's a little bit taller than what was previously approved this past week. I think given the width of the porch, the double columns don't really stand out, and I think they fit the styling of the home well. And we would consider this, from a zoning perspective, a 2-story. But the hip roof, as well as other kind of features, really help bring down the kind of perceived height. But it would be considered a 2-story, which is permitted with the approved development plan and site plan for the property. So just want to make it clear that this is considered a 2-story, but it does have a lot of features that help bring down that kind of perceived height to more of a 1.5-story feel. But especially if those two doors and planes are in line with each other, then that would be a true 2-story. But overall, that was kind of the gist of my comments, so I'll turn it over to the committee.
Okay. Comments? Talk, Mr. Architect.
Emily, could you bring up it's actually the elevation that shows Magnolia Hall and the houses to the left and right. So we're looking at 1849. Is that correct? That's the house
Yep.
number?
Yes.
Lot 9. And of course, on here, it doesn't give me the lot numbers. It gives me 1849. I think that's right. So immediately to the left of that one's 1847. It says it's 32 feet high. I know the elevation changes some, but 1849 is 32.9. And that house looks so much smaller to me than 1847. Is that the right perspective?
It is. I think it's the way the grade drops pretty significantly when we start going that direction.
You know, and I don't know, will you ever see this view? Are there any vantage points along Glass Lane or that you would actually see 1847 in comparison to 1845? I'm just using the house numbers.
Well, and just for extra clarity, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 1845 is lot 7. That's the new construction that will be behind the mansion. So the mansion doesn't have an address on this exhibit. So just for extra clarity, the 1845 doesn't correlate to the mansion. That's another house behind the mansion.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
I
but
thought
still,
that was it. I thought that was the mansion.
but still, what I'm looking at is how 1847 looks in comparison to the mansion.
Well,
I mean, it looks very large next to it. Would that ever be
That's
seen?
that's in process too. 1847. That's a taller version, and we brought the height down. So that's one reason why 1847 looks taller than 1849. 30, and that's why it says 32 feet max. If you were to measure that right there, I think that's taller than 32 feet. And we're going to be bringing that
I would too,
shortened.
because 9 inches is only the difference that's shown in number, but by what you see in the height, that's more than 9 inches.
Yeah. So we're still working on that. That's kind of work in process right now, bringing that height down and reacting to your comments on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you took something that was a little simpler in your designs and put it closer to the mansion, it might be better than having, like, just from the perspective, 1849 would look less massive to the mansion than 1847 would. So if you switch those or come up with something different.
So what you're saying that 1849 would look, you're wondering if 1849 could move to 1847's location?
And would actually look a little less large against the house. But I don't know if you'll ever see that view. That's my question. If you were on Glass Lane, could you see this view?
It
Kind of curves a little, the street
It's
right there.
gonna
at the
be-
bend.
I don't think you would with the
Very
trees.
You better not be looking over there if you're driving up Glass Lane.
Well, the
And
other
the-
thing is 1849 would look bigger, I mean, if you put it in 1847 slot, because the grade's higher.
Yeah.
And we also haven't reduced 1847 yet in this
Right.
one, so it will come down some. We
So-
haven't submitted that one.
So when you show it to us, it'd be great to see an updated view of this
Absolutely,
too.
we'll update
Yeah,
this graphic.
I've been,
We've been doing it sort of as we go along, but we hadn't gotten to that one yet, so it's still tall.
Just trying not to compete again with Magnolia Hall.
All right, anything else?
My only comment is.
Wait a minute, Josh.
Oh, real quick. I appreciate y'all taking all the transoms out, and you've heard that feedback. I actually think because those windows are still the same height, just without transoms, they read to me even a little bit bigger than they did before with the transoms.
tall because we brought the ceiling down, whereas before, top of the transom was, I think, at 10 feet.
Okay.
So it came down a foot, and it's a relative thing because I brought the porch beam down to. Do you think it looks too tall?
They read really big to me, but I'm not the architect, so.
I'd be happy to take a look at that.
I'm not an architect right now either.
Okay, Mary.
Yeah, I would prefer on the front elevation that just be windows and not a porch. I think when you get the porch, you get furniture, you get busyness. I think it's, I would rather see that not be a porch. And on your inspiration drawings, it isn't, and then that could pull that down a little too. So that would be my comment.
Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on to the last one then, which would be 1843. Nope, wait a minute. Flip the page. 1853, William Campbell Court, Lot 11.
Okay, great. Lot 11, you've seen in the streetscape before. I don't believe that you've had specific comments on this one. This is the one where it's at the end of the block. It's going to be the most prominent one, the most special of these special homes. And my main question is height. It is, as you can see in the street elevation, it's the tallest. And in my initial exuberance, I drew all of these, a bit taller than they are now. But this one, I really like the proportions of it. And given the fact that it's, very far away from the mansion, what is it, 350 or more feet, and that the grade is lower. It sits about 6 feet lower than the mansion. If that extra height would be fine. Stylistically, it's a Victorian vein. It doesn't strictly adhere to, let's say the Queen Anne or whatever. It has kind of an individual presence to it. Again, I tried to avoid some of the more exuberant, Victorian forms and ornaments. Its special feature is that walkout balcony with a view towards the pond.
Okay, staff?
I just based on all of our conversations, 37 feet, 9 inches is fairly significantly, well, not fairly significantly taller than the mansion itself. So that's just been a common theme is bringing down the overall height to less than the mansion itself, because this is, well, I can pull up. Let me zoom out a little bit. So this is the lot we're referring to, Lot 11. It's right there on the cul-de-sac. Then also it's the most visible from New Highway 96 West. So it'll be hopefully the second structure you see, with Magnolia Hall being the first. But that, given that prominence, this really does need to have a lot of review and looked at with a fine-tooth comb. Just from my personal vantage point, I think it's kind of a blending of styles. I do see the Queen Anne. Also, I just see elements of Tudor and even some Gothic kind of thrown in there as well. So I think as much ornamentation that can be, and when there's not a lot of ornamentation, but there are a lot of features happening kind of all at once. Let me pull down to the side view as well. You do have the front porch element as well as a screen porch element, right, kind of in line with this gable form here. That would be this area right here. So that would be my biggest comment is the overall height of the build of the house, as well as just the kind of variety of features that you see both from the front as well as the side elevations along essentially the 96 West viewpoint or viewshed.
Joey, can you point out what elevation would be seen from 96?
So this would be essentially facing 96 West. I mean, there's significant distance between the structure and the road, but that's still the one that would be facing 96 West. And what's also along the cul-de-sac, so there's not a lot in between the house, except for the greenery that's already there, but the location of the cul-de-sac also offers more of a viewpoint of this side elevation.
And you would look at it, and then you would look at the back of Magnolia Hall. And this is much more detailed and much busier than the back of Magnolia Hall.
Absolutely.
Kathy?
When looking at this elevation too, I think, Joey, you kind of hit the nail on the head for me. It's such a combination of styles. I do see the Tudor in it. I see Italianate. The porch balcony, is that stone?
That one there,
Yeah.
it would be brick below, and that would be, the corner posts would be brick, most likely.
Okay. I know this is a feature home on a feature lot, but I agree with Mary too. I think it's just a little bit too much going on, and I'm not sure if it all blends and works. The height, if you look at the site, the streetscape line, the overall height of it dips down there going towards the water. So again, I think when you clean this up and give us an updated version of each of them on there, we'll see how the height may or may not impact mansion. But yeah, it's got a lot going on.
And on the upstairs porch, it's not on the front elevation, so I'm glad of that, and I can understand totally why you would want it. With that said, at Harlansdale, the porches that are upstairs are very subtle. This is not a subtle porch.
And there are two porches on the upstairs, one off the front. And
Oh, there's one off the front?
Yeah.
Oh,
that front.
oh dear. Well, I didn't realize that was a porch. Then I do not think.
That's the less important of the
Yeah, I
porches.
don't think
If I had to,
upstairs
if I had to,
porches.
like, do away
Upstairs-
with one of the porches.
Upstairs porches on the streetscape where we are building on the front lawn of Magnolia Hall, it's just too much.
Well, and this house is blessed with porches because you've got a front porch, a screen porch, and then a covered porch all on the courtyard. So that's 4 on the ground level that I count. plus that, I mean, and the one upstairs off that bedroom is not, I mean, it's 7 by 16 feet. That's big, and that's not the terrace, which is 22 by 19.6. So,
There used to be more porches.
yeah, I mean,
Well, in the right place, it would be an exciting house. It's just, there's other considerations at this site.
I could definitely look at removing that front-facing porch.
I honestly
If
think
you-
when
if
you're
you need
looking
to.
at Magnolia, when you're looking from 96, you're going to have a pretty good view into the terrace porch that's above the screen porch, which I think is the more distracting of the two upstairs porches. I know that's probably not what y'all want to hear, but I do think that is going to be, I'd be interested to see how much of that you're going to see. Like
And-
people out hanging out up there.
I've done more than I want to think about tours of Franklin, even recently, and the moment when you go on a tour is looking at that back of Magnolia Hall. So just please quiet it down so you can still have that experience.
Okay, anybody else? Kathy?
Again, Mike, if you'd have done a little beautiful perspective sketch, I think you could have won me over with some of the elements. But I think if you'd have done your perspective sketch, you would have seen just how much is going on. It really helped on the other one that had the porch that jumped out so much too on it.
I agree. I think I need to show you all a perspective view of this. I have a rough 3D model that I look at, so I know what it's looking like, and I agree that'd be important to communicate that to y'all.
Can you
Especially
give
with-
us perspective when you come back from 96 and Glass Lane?
Mhm.
I think it was showing Magnolia Hall.
Yeah.
And you know
And I
something
think that would be-
realize we haven't looked at is the perspective from the rear of these houses.
Yeah.
We have completely not looked at that, and that matters too.
I was gonna kind of chime in on some of the
detail.
Yeah, there's a lot happening, like everyone said, but specifically like that kind of really wide double fascia on that front-facing gable. It's some of those things that feel I get this kind of Norwegian thing going on, and then I see the dovecot, and I think, oh, well, that's kind of a English countryside, which I think you have more details of that than anything else that are kind of in that Tudor vein. And it brought to mind, like, Charles Voysey, Edward Lutyens, all those turn of the century kind of English architects, which were very simple but very elegant. Some of the most beautiful houses you ever see. I think those might be worth looking at to kind of hone in on some of those details. But we've got arched transoms, you got some flat tops, it's just a conglomerate of things. But I think from a massing perspective, if you start to simplify some things and hone in and just kind of own one of the styles, then it's going to tell you how that front porch ought to be, how the dormers ought to look, some of the openings, whether they're flat or arched, some of those eave lines maybe tighten up a little bit, the fascias. I think it could help to be decisive on a style.
So it's, yeah, I can certainly do that. I was trying to adopt the mindset of a Victorian architect, and which is more is better, and if it looks good, it is good. And they didn't care when the styles came over from England. And of course, they had good, theoretical foundations and reasons why they were doing it, and it got here, and we just went hog wild, and really, it was a celebration of exuberance, and so, hence, that's why I felt comfortable with mixing it up a little bit. But I definitely hear y'all, and I can definitely
I think the
take a look at that and tone that back, and maybe look at some of that English precedent. Are you okay with like an English arts and crafts precedent?
Yeah, I mean, that's
in
what
this?
that was. Yeah, the early Lutchins, Boise stuff was the arts and crafts movement. I think the difficult part about this particular site is the mansion has a pretty modest roof, and it's not really high pitched, so it doesn't lend itself to tall things around it, and it is pretty plain, at least, especially from a distance. It's like it's a big square house, and it's lovely, but it's not adorned with a lot of things. So it kind of forces our hand into really being more policing of those details in a way that maybe we wouldn't be on another house. If that were a big, stick style Victorian that had 12 pitches and was 40 feet tall and had a tower and all that, we probably wouldn't have had 80% of these conversations. But it's a very simply detailed Italianate that's even been meddled with, as we know, and a really low pitched roof, which is indicative of Italianate with this cupola. And it's like, well, what goes with that? Nothing really goes with it, but we're having to find some kind of meeting place with you all because we want something nice there, and you all are going to do something. So I'm appreciative of the idea that we get a say-so, but we have to be more particular about it. So muting some of the details down doesn't necessarily go in the marketing pamphlet, but it does help us protect.
Well, if it's done right.
Yeah, you can. And that's why I think some of those stylistic things that we were talking about will help simplify, and if they're executed really well, but they're simple, I think it can go a long way.
Okay, anything else?
And I was going to say one thing in response to that really quickly. That's the challenge of the Italianate of the mansion is the low slope roof, full height walls, full 2-story height walls with a low slope roof, and that that's the challenge, how to react to that, and we're trying to avoid that Italianate style. Of course, you have to if you're not doing a full 2-story height house. But thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Oh, I think you kind of hit it on the head. More is not more in this case. And I think, I don't want to go down the street and it feel like model homes or, Disney World-ish. Like, ooh, we're in this country now. We're in this country now. We're in this country now. Epcot, yeah. So anyway, I think you hit it. More is not more.
And you all, the homes you build, the details are wonderful. So even if it's fairly simple, your details are always wonderful. So I think they're going to come across very elegant, even if they're simplified. It's the prize setting, so that would be my thought.
I think timeless is the word that comes to mind. It's like, if you can really make it simple but beautiful, then it will be timeless. Start to inject some of these details that are cool right now, but are just ornamental. Sometimes those can not age well.
Mr. Chair, one more quick question. Would it be beneficial to the commission to have, just for future DRC or formal submittals, more color elevations with these submittals? Because just personally, I would not have read that as brick, that bay window form. I know this is still an early design, but I think just moving forward, it would help both staff and the commission to have just some sort for especially for the materials and how they
Patches,
relate to each
smokes,
other.
Whatever. I don't know that they have to be color, but some indication of what it is.
Okay, anything else?
I don't know if there's any way to do it, Mr. Chair, but with these important houses, and we're almost 3.5 hours looking at them, I wish there were some way that we could do, I don't know if it's a called meeting or do one meeting and a bit of a break in the other. I just hate that for their sake that we're at the end of 3.5 hours looking at something this important. Or something.
Have a special meeting.
That's just how it's gone.
I'm grateful we haven't reviewed
I hope we
10
did.
at once.
Yes,
so thank
absolutely.
You for that.
That's-
I hope
Well,
we gave it all.
they're grateful they're not reviewing 10 at once.
And I was going to, just to clarify, it sounds like I can make it
adjustments to 9, and it sounds like I'd be fairly confident in submitting that to the Historic Zoning Commission. 6, what's your opinion on 6, DRC or Historic Zoning? Like, could I make adjustments and speak with staff, or?
Do we have height concerns on that? Was it the Craftsman one?
That one is within range.
But it's still
The first-
32 feet 2 inches with
Yep.
that added 2-foot grade.
I think you're okay with that one, submitting that one.
I think we talked
The
about the
first one.
dormers.
The
We
first
talked
one.
about the
Yeah.
porch
The
on the
first
front,
The
which you've
first
already
one.
modified.
With staff comments.
And I just make sure that line up, you get those heights adjusted so that it's not looking wonky. Like, why is this one so much taller or shorter? I'd get those cleaned up,
Okay.
because that's just rife for confusion.
It sounds like 11 might be DRC again.
Yes, without question. That you've had the most comments on that one.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, anything else? Otherwise, we're adjourned.
Just a quick announcement to remind you all that there's a special DRC July 31st for City Hall, and then the special site visit and tour of the factory, August 3rd at 3 p.m. So that'll be a really great tour through and around, and you'll get to see a lot of the history of the factory.